Well, we're back again. Welcome to the podcast. This podcast is brought to you by WSM Auctions over there on 67th Avenue in Buckeye. What I like about those guys, Brandon, and it's second Saturday of every month, don't forget that, but what I like about those guys is the maintenance, the APS trucks, the SRP trucks, the city trucks that they get in. Those guys got great contracts, so they know, and you know the backstory of the equipment. Will you buy a lot for irrigator trucks?
For sure. And not only that, when you go to sell something there, they do a real good job of marketing it for you. They bring it in, wash it all up, take pictures inside and out. I mean, they do a good job on the selling side of it too, not just the buying, the people that buying it, but they'll take care of you when you sell something.
Great. So if you guys want to hit up an auction, second Saturday of every month, WSM.
Yes.
How excited are we to have, I don't know if anybody's as excited as Cesar, but we got Dennis Gatz on today. Multi-time NFR qualifier, the man in the game. I don't know. What else can we say about this guy, Cesar?
Well, I'll introduce him to you. He's one of my heroes, and I'd like to tell the people that the evolution of the game is partly because of Dennis Gatz, because of the horse show stuff is coming on now a lot. But when he was coming up making the NFR, the care of his horses were immaculate. He had quality horses, and now you look at certain ropers now, it's the same. They show up with really good quality horses. They take care of them properly. It's the evolution of back in the 80s to now. I think the horse care and the horses is what's changing the game, and I believe Dennis is one of the men that started the evolution off. And so, without further ado, I want to introduce you to Dennis Gatz, and we're going to talk a few stories about some of the horses that you've had in your time. And I talked to the boys earlier about the BFI. You were roping with Jake Barnes, and like Dennis is roped with the greatest of the greats. But he had a black horse that, because I studied tapes when I was a kid, and this horse was just not a hair out of place, and he was just a beautiful horse and worked well. And Dennis showed him really good and roped good on him. And like I said, I want to talk to you a little bit about a couple of the horses that you really like and maybe rode in your career that you like, I guess you loved, and kind of can still remember to this day.
Mm-hmm. I've had some good horses, very lucky and fortunate for the horsepower that I had. My father was in the horse business, made a big difference in what I got to ride, but we never got to ride the same one very long. I've had some of the greatest horses. Chris Jones had a dun horse that won the pot of gold. He was 3 years old. That happened to be one of the greatest horses I ever had. I used him in my wedding, pulled a Surrey with him, got in some good wagon wrecks with him. I mean, I had a horse called Termite that I got from Shop Branham. When we got him, he had checkerboards on his butt where they had drawn checkerboards for the curriculum, and he couldn't run very fast. I took him to Salinas, and he outran everybody. And he became one of the greatest horses I ever had. Termite, I've had a lot of horses,
So when I heard that you were coming on the podcast, I made a couple calls. I gotta make sure I know what I'm talking about on here, or at least kind of act like it. And I called a guy named Brian Adams, and right. I mean, the first thing this guy told me, he goes, Dennis, you got to ask him about Dashboard. He says Dashboard was the horse. He said I guess Brian apparently loved that horse.
The funny thing was that my dad told me to go to Bakersfield and pick up this horse, a little bay horse, and Russell Duke owned him, and I picked him up, and before I got home, I stopped and roped at David Moses' house, and my dad didn't get to own him. I said, you ain't getting this one. And we were at Rock Springs, Wyoming, and Walt Rodman wanted to ride him, so I let him on, and he about went over to Saddlehorn. The horse stopped so hard, and he said, man, you better call him Dashboard, because he threw me right through the windshield. So we just, from then on, if you called forward, you're just done. He wouldn't go no further. If you knew how to ride him, easy to ride. If you didn't, he'd leave you sitting over there.
Yeah.
I threw 3 coils at Reno Rodeo one time on the high teamer because I wasn't going no farther.
That was it. He was done where he was done.
He was good though. My funny thing was my dad bought him as a head horse, and I roped on the way home. I stopped and roped, and he didn't make it to Dad's.
When was the first time you made the NFR?
86. I won the Rookie of the Year in 86. Wow. And
I did the same thing when I knew you were coming on, so I called Kai and Sayer, and he was smiling, laughing through he said, oh yeah, there's a lot of stories to tell, but he said that you and Bobby, he said you guys were one of the toughest teams imaginable. He said it was unbelievable.
Bobby and I did good. The day I started with Rocky Carpenter, really my rookie year, and we didn't win a whole lot the winter, and then we win second at Reno. And I had already got a partner for the 4th of July named Scott Lermore. And at the same time this is all going on, we're switching partners. And Rocky and I went second at Reno, so he decides he wants to go again. Well, it's too late. I've already got a new partner for the 4th of July. And then David Moses standing there in a circle, and he said, hey, you want to rope at Salinas? And I said, are you talking to me? This guy never said anything to me before. So obviously I said, yeah, well, now I got to tell Scott Lermore we're not going over 4th of July. And that was the first guy to rope with that I was, like we was 4-3 at Dickinson, North Dakota or something like that. And I had never seen that kind of a talent. I was just a kid that jackpotted with my father.
Yeah.
You know.
So before we got the podcast started, we were kind of chatting a little bit, and you got to tell the viewers about the truck story. I mean, that was one of the best. I mean, I've heard some stories over my time.
You guys, we were told that we wouldn't get to rope with this rope in Grangeville, Idaho. We're at Colorado Springs rodeoing, and it's a long ways from Colorado Springs to Grangeville. And Mike Beers told us that he's no good. Don't go rope up there. So I kept calling this guy, and he said, if you got $200 in rope, you can enter. Well, come to find out that he had Lloyd's of London back this event, and if nobody won the roping, he didn't get it all paid off. And there was 2 trucks involved and 4 horse trailers in this roping. And they only had 30 teams. So we ended up, I talked Bobby into going with us. He said, I don't really want to go. You know, it's a long ways. So I had a driver, and I had a Greyhound bus, and we had our good horses at the time, and I had a little paint horse that was phenomenal. And we jumped in that bus and went nonstop to Grangeville. The roping was Saturday and Sunday, and we pulled in Sunday morning. And this guy was thrilled to death. The first round wasn't over yet with 30 teams. And he had to have that money won, so he let us get a couple partners. And we were the only team to rope that Sunday morning before the second round started. And the roping was set up to where you had to be under 5 flat to win the prizes. Well, it was all said and done. We had won we were 4 flat instead of 5 flat. We're 4 flat to win that trailer, and then we won the average in the roping, and this guy went nuts. And it was quite a roping and quite an experience, because Bobby's yellow horse was silver when we got done. I mean, that bus had gray smoke all over it. But it was a good deal. Where, I don't know what we could say about what we won, but it was a good deal.
Yeah. What about the trucks when you went to go pick up?
Well, we had
ordered. That's the best part of the story. I don't know.
The funny thing is we had ordered crew cab dualies when we left there, and when I showed up to get our trucks, there was a super cab dually for each one of us with our names on it, and that wasn't what we ordered. So I called Bob Hurley Sr. and told him that these aren't the trucks, and he said, "You sit right there." He said, "You'll get the truck you ordered for sure," because Mr. Hurley had a lot of power. And it was funny because Monty Jack closes the guy that put on the rope and closes the door behind me and says, "There's a truck out there with your name on it. I would advise you to get in it and drive off." So needless to say, that's what I did.
You left
I left. It had 500 miles on it, and it was fixing to have a lot more, is what that guy said.
Yeah.
So it was a pretty good experience. But it was funny because the trailers we won, my dad had a guy from Canada pick them up, but they never went with us.
You never got to see him.
No, he sold them. They went to Canada.
Right.
They went to Butch Sahara up there. And I'll never forget, my dad called me and said, "I'm going to trade your truck off." Well, it was paid for because we won it free and clear. Well, he had a semi truck coming in to unload cattle, and the gate was closed. So he pulled up on the road to open the gate, and there's foggy. Well, he locked that door in that truck. So he takes a tire iron and busts the back window out of it because it was foggy. And he said, "You don't need that truck." He said he traded for a 3/4 ton, a 2-horse trailer, and 2 horses. And I said, "Dad, we didn't need that." He said, "Oh, it's a good trade." So a deal's a deal,
Yeah, when I was talking to Brian, he was telling me some stories too, and he said that your dad at one time, or I guess a lot of time, had about 300 head of horses there.
We kept 80 on 9 acres of land. There's 80 horses there, and he sold an average of 5 a day at one time.
Yeah, and he said that there was different barns that them different horses went to based on what they cost. Or
you had to understand that my father's program was set up to sell horses, and if that horse didn't sell, he would rotate down the barn. And if maybe he didn't put the right people on them, but he had a bunch of us guys that roped all the time. We roped Tuesdays and Thursdays for public, and the rest of the time, I mean, we rode them and roped all the time. And if they didn't sell, they just keep going rotating down the barn. Well, that's how the horses would end up being $1,750. He may give $10,000 for one. If he didn't sell, he was in that $1,750. Rube Woolsey bought a white horse for 1750 that I believe he rode the BFI and all over. That's how that worked for my dad's place. But he had so many horses. I saw him sell the same horse 3 times in one day. Yeah, I mean, this guy he'd buy this horse, and my dad would say, "You want to sell that horse?" And he'd say, "Well, I just bought him." He'd say, "Well, you want to make 500?" Hand him that guy right there, and he would. And 3 times in one day, same horse. It was kind of amazing to see his operation work.
What do you think about the current state of the horse market? Cesar touched on it a little last week.
The horse market is today. The horses bringing a lot of money are the ones that go through the sales and stuff, and they got good horses. I mean, there's a lot more better quality now, but you can't buy horses anymore for $4,500 or $5,000. It's unheard of. They want to know what's wrong with them, right? And a guy that works for a living may have a horse and get broke, needs to sell him. Well, that's where the good horses come into.
Yeah, we talked a little bit last week. I was telling Cesar a story. I got a friend of mine that bought a horse from Levi Simpson, and he paid $40,000 for it. And from Monday to Tuesday, that guy was a different roper. And Cesar, I mean, you can speak on this, but Cesar said it's because those horses that go down the road and them guys travel on and you travel on, they just become machines. I mean, they're just so automatic, and they're such a big part of team roping. People think, oh, well, man, that guy's a really good roper. Well, that horse is really good to get him down the road.
It makes a world of difference. And one that fits, and when the guy finds one that fits, then he don't him, because there's only a few of them that fit somebody, and the right guys get the right horses that fit, and they're unstoppable. Mm-hmm. Steve Northcott had a little dun horse that was out of this world, and then he sold him to Al Bach, and this little horse went around the world with people, but he was the best horse there was. He could outrun anything else out there. So anybody that rode him won money. But when you put Steve Northcott on him, whole different ballgame. He dominated. Yeah. Really dominated.
So, Cesar, what do you like sitting here with this guy? What one question when you were a kid, or what one question when you were going down the road, if you could have just had this guy in the pickup with you and you had just, I don't know, you roped a toe at the NFR like you told us about or whatever, what would you ask that guy? Like, I mean, this is the man to ask.
Especially like for the people that are looking for horses, is there something that you look for? And like, because we touched on it, like a good horse, a horse that'll fit you, will change your game. Is there something that for the viewers maybe, or for the listeners can kind of, you can touch on about what a good horse, kind of the qualities a good horse takes nowadays?
You'd want to look for one that's easy to ride. First off, there's all kinds of horses out there, and everybody thinks they can ride them. Well, sometimes there's too much power for a novice guy to ride, and he doesn't know how to handle that much. You look for the ones that you could win on. It doesn't matter how good that horse is. If you can't ride him, it's pretty tough to win on him. And I see that a lot. I mean, you understand that.
Yeah, well, like that kind of, for me in my career, I tried to, a horse maybe didn't fit my style, but I tried to make it work. You got to spend some time with Brandon Adams, and I got a few horses from him, and he sent me with a horse that just quite didn't fit my style, but it was a nice horse. And he told me, hey, come back. There's another horse that you ride really good, a little bit smaller type horse. But we talked about him last time we were on the podcast. His horse's name was Dracula. He got me to the NFR, cute little horse. And
got you in trouble with your wife.
Yeah, he gave me a big old hickey, bit me in the neck. That's how I got his name, Dracula. I went to give him some ace, and he went and bit me in the neck, and I mean the nastiest, biggest hickey on the back of my neck right here. But like that Brandon told me, that horse, the sorrel horse, fits you better. He watched me practice on them horses, and after having that, it was a bay horse. I had the bay horse for a few weeks, almost 3 weeks, and I rodeoed on him and did okay on him. And then as soon as I got this sorrel horse, I went to just winning everything on him. And it's just like I tried to make it fit. And like you talked about having Dennis in the truck, I would have asked him that question right there, man. Like, what do I need to do on horsepower to keep me at the top of the game? Because these guys I talked about, when you're going to the pro rodeos, especially the 4th of July, you're swimming with sharks out there. It just kind of depends on what shark you are. You're tiger shark, bull shark, great white. What are you? You need to jump in there and swim with them. If they smell blood, you're They're gonna eat
That's
you.
a
You know
whole
what I
other
mean?
topic there. You got some. I mean that week and those horsepower that you have to get on a lot of different horses that week. You know, it's who swings the biggest loop. I mean, you know, really.
Yeah.
Because you're not on your same horse every time. You got horses in the Northwest. You got horses at Pecos.
Yeah, so why don't you two guys explain that? Like, 'cause
You know.
some listeners aren't going to understand that 4th of July run.
We have horses in the Northwest because we've got entered up there. We'll run 6 steers in the Northwest. We'll run steers in Utah. We'll run steers, you know, you'll be from Pecos to Greeley to St. Paul, Malala, all them up there. And you've got horses everywhere. Well, David Moats had told us that you always want to ride your own horse. You know, if you get in your car, you'll win a race. You get on somebody else's car, you got to adjust the seat. You're not sure how it acts, which you can get away with it sometimes. But if you've got a chance to ride your own, get them there. So we would spend more money, put a driver up there. That way we were on our own horses. It may not be the best, but is that what you guys did also?
Right. Well, like nowadays, it's almost a prerequisite to have at least 2 really good horses, so you can ship one. Say, because the start of the 4th of July, you're starting pretty much right there from Reno. You know, you're leaving at the end of June, and that's what kicks off your 4th of July. If you leave on a good note from Reno, it just you notice all the guys that do good out there. They continue winning because that's just the start of it. But Dennis talked about you starting. You know, you got St. Paul, you got Malala, you got a handful of the rodeos in the Northwest, and then you got the central rodeos. You got Greeley, you got Livingston, you got a handful of rodeos in Montana right there in the central, and then you got Texas rodeos, and you got a rodeo here and a big premier rodeo is Prescott, Arizona over here too. So you can't miss that. And it's like you got the 3 different locations. You got to fly here, fly there. And I told you about my bull riding wreck at St. Paul, you know, and then I had to fly the next morning to Window Rock, you know, like to rope at the rodeo there. So it's like we're all over the place. I had to ride Brad Culpepper's horse at Window Rock, a little bitty paint, cute horse. I had to leave my stuff in the Northwest, and then we got back on a plane and met up with my rig. You know, we leave. It was in Greeley and all that stuff. We made the short go there, and then we continue to go to different rodeos. But it's a you have to have a handful of horses, and Dennis, like you talked about, having a couple of your own, like. If you happen to mount out on somebody else's horse, you want to pick one that fits your style.
It's hard to dominate when you don't get on your own ride. I mean, you can get on good horses, but like Bobby, Hurley, and Matt Tyler, they had great head horses, always. But it was kind of funny. Matt would get on Bobby's horse and ride him at the rodeos, and then come short round, Bobby would want to get on Matt's, and Matt would say, no. It was kind of a big kick out of that because those two, they lived with me. I had a 2-story house, they lived with me, but they had a little rivalry there. We won Dodge trucks at the PRCA rodeos, and Matt and Mike Beers were they would contest with us, and we were tied going in, and Matt decided, hey, let's split the trucks. Well, Bobby said, no, we didn't rodeo hard enough to get them. We're going to Florida. So we all had to go to Florida for the last rodeos, and Bobby set a rig down there, and Matt wanted to ride Bobby's horse. You know, we didn't earn enough there.
You mentioned Matt Tyler. I think he's one of the most underrated, guys. Just as much as he's made it, 20
Matt
times.
Tyler was great.
And just when you mentioned headers, like a lot of times he gets overlooked. I think because he was so great.
Matt Tyler was awesome, and he had a horse. He had horses called. He had a couple of them. One from Rodeo Chuck they called him Rodeo Chuck. That was about one of the greatest horses. And then Big Daddy was another one.
Big Daddy was one of the fastest head
But Matt
horses.
kept horses underneath him that could fly.
Yeah.
And they could. And I roped with Matt one time at the national finals. Matt was a good partner.
I can remember staying up when it was on ESPN. You had to stay up till 10 o'clock at night, back in those days and watching.
Matt and I had a lot of fun.
Wade Wheatley and Matt Tyler. And that was.
Matt Tyler set the guys up to throw fast. His head horses were a little faster, and he'd run them down there one more stride, but it would set the heeler up to throw fast. So Matt, one of his secrets to success was heeling with some of the best heelers with the best heel horses. And he won so much with them guys.
You guys would laugh. Bobby Hurley and Matt Tyler riding back from Red Bluff with Leo and Gerald. And Leo tells them they need to get a job application from McDonald's the way they had. And I'll never forget it. Bobby Hurley called me. He got out the airport right there. Matt had to go on with Gerald, but they told him to get an application from McDonald's the way they had. And it was hilarious.
So, out of all the rodeos you've been to, you've been doing this a long, long time. Where's your favorite rodeo at?
Salinas.
Salinas is your favorite. I got a friend named Don Yates. He'll tell you the same thing. He fought bulls there a lot, and he loves Salinas. He just loves.
I won Salinas the first year I went with David Moats, and he had prepped me very well. I mean, David Moats was one of the best partners I ever had, and he taught me to win. You know, when it was time to do the smart thing. You know, but Salinas, we had roped together at 2 rodeos, and I had missed, and I said, you probably ought to get you another partner. I know how you guys do this. And he said, look, Pard, he said, I'm your partner till December. I don't care whether you catch another one. Next day we win Salinas or start winning Salinas. And it was quite a good partnership, you know.
So is that where the mental part of the game comes in? Because, you know, you miss a couple, you start getting down on yourself, thinking you're letting your partner down. Then your partner gathers you up and says, if you don't catch another one, I don't care.
That'd be pretty cool to know that he said that.
Yeah.
You know.
And not only that, but David Moats was a guy, I'd sit at home and watch TV and see this guy, and the next day I'm roping with him.
Yeah.
A little uncomfortable, you know. I mean, the middle game is very different in the PRCA. You know, the jackpots maybe so, but not as much. Don't you think in the PRCA you got one partner, one go, and you might drive 12 or 24 hours to run one steer.
Yeah.
This guy
That's a long ride home.
For all the young listeners out there, I think, you know, wanting to go rodeo and stuff, that's a pretty important right there to you got your healer's back right there. I know Coulter, when I rodeoed with him, he had my back, and we could actually study film, and he would help me out. Like we're out there together, and if you have a camaraderie like that and your partner knows you got your back, you'll do really good. And I feel like that's what got Dennis right there to the next level, is that partner believing in him. He's like, man, we're gonna do some good. And then, like you said, that's a secret to success.
At the end of the day, I mean, you guys are roping in the arena, but there's times where you guys are 500 million miles from nowhere, and you guys break down. That's just you and your partner. There's a lot more to it.
And I mean, you make a living with that guy. I mean, you sit beside a guy for 90,000 miles on a pickup. Yeah. You better get to know him.
Yeah, you better get to know him well.
And you do get to know him well.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, he touched on something about the videos. You know, we didn't have the videos that they now have, and we didn't get to learn that way. We would go sit in a practice pen and run 100 or 200 steers in a day. It was nothing to run 100 steers at David Moats' house, because he wanted you to rope 100 steers a day no matter what. That way it was second nature.
So what was your practice schedule? Because after talking to Cesar last week, I've got some calls from people who have watched the podcast, and they say, man, that made me feel really good, because I have some buddies that practice a lot, man. They're out there in their own pens, and they're practicing every day, and they get some flack from other guys, and they say, oh man, you practice too much, like you're putting too much in it. And then after sitting here listening to Cesar say that Coulter's there, you know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner, Coulter's roping with 3 different partners, or whoever going down the rodeo flag somebody down to heal some
just
steers.
To turn more steers.
And here's something that I believe in. You get out of it what you put into it. I mean, like my story was different, because my folks got divorced when I was young, and I lived in town, but I had a goat in the backyard, which he didn't know this about me, but I was hard on that goat. You know?
Rope.
And I mean, I'd tie that rope around my waist and think I was Ricky Green, which was one of my heroes, and I'd rope that goat as he went by and just fall back and just let it go down. And nobody knew that, you know.
Yeah, like I tell the young kids, you want to be a good roper. If you can catch a goat, you can catch a steer. The goats move twice as fast as a steer does. If you can see the legs and spot the legs out on a goat, you can see the legs on a steer.
Here, not to get off track, but
Off track's where we're at.
I'm cowboying for Bobby Boyd down there, and on the way home we hear about a goat roping in Odessa. So I hadn't been to a goat roping in my life. We pull into a bar, and there's a goat roping, a little goat pen out back. I don't know a soul. I don't know who to get. And I see them all out there. Well, my wife finds me out there jogging, trying to get loosened up in tennis shoes. We've been cowboying all day. We were sore, and I didn't know who to ask. You know, there's no warm-up arena. Is this hilarious? And I think I won $1,000 in the goat roping.
There you go.
But it was something else. A little uncomfortable, you know, because I didn't know nobody, and to be at the goat roping. But I was a real goat roper.
It only took a couple runs for you to start getting some partners.
Yeah,
though.
yeah.
You figured out you can catch. They were all coming to you, though, right?
So this is kind of going to be like a 2-part question, like half question, half story. But you watched the finals with Rocker Steiner, and he's a little wild, right? Mm-hmm. You know, you watched him. I'm sure you watched his dad go before him and his grandpa before him. Mm-hmm. And like I said, I called Brian, and boy, I'm surprised Brian ain't here right now wanting to get an autograph, because he was so excited to tell me all these stories. He says, man, when we were kids, he says, that Dennis, he showed up back there to some junior big world deal, maybe in Oklahoma or something, I forget where he told me, but he said he got out and had long hair down to his shoulders and had an AC/DC shirt on, He had Nike tennis shoes with his Wranglers tucked in behind him. He just put the ass whooping on all of them. He says that guy was Rocker Steiner before Rocker Steiner thought about being Rocker Steiner.
I went to, it's funny, I went to the World Junior Championships in a 65.
That's what he was.
At an old pickup. 65 Chevrolet pickup. We raced it all the time. And I lived there with Gary Ellis in Durant, Oklahoma, and he was going to school with Clay Tom Cooper and them. And it was quite an experience for a young kid, 16 years old, to be in that environment. Very much so. Yeah.
So like you show up like that, and you just look you look a little not the mold, I guess.
I win 20. First time I went to junior open, I went 2,800 in the junior senior, and me and Gary went to Fort Worth, and there's no telling what we did after that. Yeah. But to be in that roping, I mean, I didn't think I roped very good anyway. And when I started heeling, when I first went to the junior championships, I just started heeling. I had heeled in my backyard, heeled at goat all the time, but I never heeled off a horse. And it was entertaining. I mean, because I didn't have no boundaries. I was pretty wild. Yeah. I will say.
Yeah.
We heard you rode more than just horses in them too.
I did rode motorcycle a little bit. I got involved in the wrong neighborhood. You have to understand, when I got away from rodeo, I kind of went back home, and I thought everybody had didn't change, but they had, and you find myself in situations that I shouldn't have been in. It's a different environment when you go home, and we had a part of our town that was probably a little bit like Tucson, the south side.
What town was that?
Modesto, California. And it was started where American Graffiti was formed, where the hot rod cars were. And I didn't know much about hot rod cars, but I had a hot rod pickup, and I raced it all the time, and I ended up getting a lot of trouble. Not kinda.
Not kinda.
Not kinda.
Kinda.
Yeah, I mean.
Was that, I heard a little bit and piece of the story. You guys were talking and I had stepped outside, but were you roping part of the year and then?
No, when I quit roping, I didn't want to be around ropers.
You just wake up one morning and decide that, or?
Well, I just had enough. When this all happened, this is my downfall. Bobby Hurley was roping with Clay, but he wouldn't tell me. So I go see my grandmother in Oklahoma, up there in Alva, Oklahoma, and she said, "So I hear Bobby's roping with Clay." I said, "You too?" Now he has yet to talk to me. So I go back to Arkansas. We're getting ready for the finals, and I said, "Hey, we need to talk," And he said, "Well," he goes, "Yeah." We just started yawning, and I knew when he yawned, it was a little different, And he said, "Yeah, I'm gonna rope with Clay next year," or he said, "Going back to school first." I said, "Going back to school? Are you and Clay gonna commute back and forth together?" So that night I loaded 4 horses in a 3-horse trailer, and I went to Junior World Championships. Instead of practicing 4 more days for the finals, I loaded up and went to Camarillo. I white knuckled at Camarillo, and when I get out, I slip and fall on the ice. I banged my head. I mean, it was quite a trip. But I was mad because Bobby wouldn't tell me the truth, which I had been screwing up, and it was all my fault. Don't get me wrong. But Bobby and I sat together for a long time. We were friends before we ever rodeoed together. He stayed at my house. I mean, we were just really, really close friends. And wasn't Bobby's fault, it was my fault. I didn't take it very good. But it was pretty wild. I didn't go the opposite direction. I didn't want to be around any team ropers.
So how long were you in that direction?
8 years probably.
Yeah.
It took a long time for me to pull my head out.
Yeah. Did you pull your head out because you kind of just started missing the horses? Because Cesar kind of always touches on that sometimes them horses just seem to have a power that they bring a guy back into it, or they'll connect people. Like the guy can he says.
For instance, I took it all the way to the penitentiary. I mean, I really did. And for me to survive where I went, and Adams hired me to go to work for him, it really changed my life. I got back in the right environment, the right people, and doing the right thing.
Yeah, I mean that guy.
The Adamses were great to me.
Yeah,
great.
I mean they had praises upon praises for you.
But you touched on a base where most people don't survive where I went.
Yeah.
And nor would I advise it for any young guy to go. I won't even bring that up.
Yeah. That's kind of what they need to hear, though, because I think myself, I kind of got in a situation where if I was around the wrong people, and it don't take very long for you to go on the wrong side of the track, and I feel like horses and having a strong family kind of brought me, or kind of let me know that, hey, if you're gonna rope this, we got to work hard at it, and it'll take you to. I mean, it's taken me places that I can only dream about, and everything that I got is because of it. If I would have just went the wrong direction, like you talked about, it don't take very long, or it's you get around the wrong people, it can go south very fast.
It's not hard to look good in that crowd.
No,
You know,
no.
and that's something that we feed into very easily because we've had a little light, we've been successful, and to come home and think that we're
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, that is.
I never thought of that.
Yeah, that is.
That's a great way to put
you
it.
know, we have to see a little success, which causes a few problems.
Yeah.
It didn't matter what I was doing, as long as I was winning, people would overlook that, and it shouldn't have been overlooked. You know, at one time I weighed 148 pounds and thought I was doing all right. Well, obviously I wasn't. You know.
Right.
But as
You
long
were
as
catching
I,
cattle, so nobody's.
If you catch it was all good, and then that's,
Everybody was fine, yeah. I have a friend of mine, I'll tell a quick story. I have a friend of mine, and I mean, he was the kind of friend that if we were playing baseball, he was the shortstop. If we were roping, he was the healer. I mean, if we were playing football, he was the quarterback. I mean, this guy was an athlete. If it didn't matter. If we were flipping quarters, this guy was beating you. And it's the same thing happened, you know, he's got kids and he had a great job and he just kind of got around the wrong people. And now that you said that to me, that might explain the 10 years I've been banging my head against the wall, wondering what made that guy go that way. Cause just showing that little bit of light, it's really easy to look cool around those people. And he's currently in the penitentiary, and he ain't gonna be out for a long, long time because he.
Shot Branham was one of the first guys that ever got me sober was Shot Branham, and he was as country as they get. But he ended up spending almost 90 days with me in the practice pen, and he was, as a matter of fact, down at Popeye Bolting House, the Shot would come and stay with me, and it's quite an experience. Shot was good.
Yeah.
But he rode horses for us for $10 a ride. And this guy was as country as they get. Well, after having him practice pen for a while, he was the guy to try and beat. I mean, he could do it like nobody else could, and was cowboy enough. But he'd never been anywhere, never been to town. Remember that?
Yeah, well, he for those people that don't know who Shot Branham is, he's made the finals a few times, and like Dennis rode some badass horses. But he would wear chinks at the NFR. That's one of the only healers that ever did that. But it was just to show you, hey, I'm cowboy, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm not from around here, man.
Yeah.
Like I'm a cowboy.
I might be making my living here, but I'm a cowboy.
He didn't go to town until he's 18 years old. And I get him partnered with David Most had called me, and right here in Tucson, matter of fact, he said, "Who could I get that ropes like you?" And I said, "Only one guy I know, Shot Branham." I said, "But he'll knock you down now if you go to custody, so don't." So he's a cowboy.
Fight back.
I called Shot Branham right here, Triple T, and I said, "Shot, you want to fulfill your dream?" He said, "Let me talk to Peggy." I said, "What?" And he went to ask Peggy if he could go, and he said, "I'll do it." So he buddied with us, and Shot went out there, and we went rodeoing, and you want to talk about fun. Now, this guy had never been nowhere. I put him on snow skis. You could spray. He had a horse called Hooch, 9 years old when we started him, and when you go to spray him with a fly spray bottle, he'd kick it out of your head. He was bronc.
But he loved it.
But I mean, Shot was a very exceptional human being. I mean, he listened to that rock and roll, and it was funny because he could ride them.
Yeah. He could just get down on anything. It didn't really matter. Huh?
He could ride. I mean, we bought 60 horses from Shot Branham that year, and he had to take a little ride off of them when you got them because if you raised a foot, they were gone. I tell a story here. Shot Branham had two Palomino horses, were twins, and he wants to sell them. So Jim McCorkindale was an old man, not an old man, but a guy that bought some good horses. And the first horse Shot shows him is this little Palomino horse, and Shot, this man said, "I'd like to see your horse." And Shot cinches him up, steps on him, kicks off out there, slides him, spins him both ways, runs right back to us, slides him at us, spins him and goes, hands the bridle reins to this Jim McCorkindale. And this old McCorkindale said, "I can't ride one side of him, son." And Shot couldn't figure out what he'd done. Well, he said, "What'd I do?" You didn't need to show him everything, you know. And from then on, Shot didn't show him that way, but it was pretty funny to see him. He just stepped off handing that rein like that. It was funny. There was a little mounted up on one side and very cowboy all the way around. Had a black horse, real pretty horse, and the back cinch brakes, the tie between. And he goes whipping on him, and they said, "Hey," they're trying to call him off. He said, "Hey, he belongs to me." And that horse, he got him stopped bucking. Well, I eased around the arena, and I get over and I ask him, "What do you do for a living, Shot?" And he said, "I ride horses." I said, "You got any room?" He said, "I got room for 3. So we go back to Popeye Bolting House, the place where I was living, and he took 3 horses home. And the funny thing is I get a bill in the mail about 3 weeks later for $111. And Shaw remembered this. I called him up and I said, "What's this odd number with this bill?" And he said, "Well, I get $10 a ride, and the rest is what he ate out of the round bell." And we laughed. I mean,
That's an honest guy right there.
but I mean, Shaw was that honest and still is. I mean, they call him Papa, and this is one of the greatest riders and the ropers I ever met. And he was a cowboy.
In your book, who is the greatest header and the greatest healer?
H.P. Evans would be
number one.
my pick if I had to pick headers. And then again, without a doubt, you've got Leo Camarillo and those guys that changed the game. I mean, Leo is one of the greatest. He changed his game twice. He went from being just a catcher to throw fast. And I happened to have the opportunity to get in a truck with him when I was 18 years old. And his mental game was phenomenal.
Do you watch much of the current rope, and who do you think right now in the NFR guys are your top pick right now? Who you biased?
You still got, like Clay O'Brien is going, but there's no doubt about it. Clay O'Brien's the best who's ever walked.
Yeah.
In any condition, that's my
I agree with that.
I used to call him Sheriff. He and I had an agreement that Crossfire was legal if you could see the Ferris wheel. And we battled it out for years. But you've got a guy like Steve Northcott, and there's this new generation that, Wesley Thorpe ain't no joke.
Yes, sir.
There's some guys that still need to get their chance.
Right?
They need to get their chance, and that's just a kid when you speak of.
Yeah.
Those guys are young. Yeah. I went out there to the rodeos last year, and lightning a guy glare. I said, "You guys see that old man?" I think it was T or something. Said, "Yeah, he used to do that for a living." Well, it was different because I went to a rope just the other day in Wickenburg, where you had to bring your partner. I go to Muley roping on Friday night. I didn't have a partner. Couldn't get one. I didn't know a soul. So I sat there and watched. But now most of them you can draw in and get you a run, and that's the cool part.
So what do you think about that? I mean, we touched on it a little bit, but we're pretty partial to Arizona. We think we're not California, we're not Texas, we're kind of Arizona, and we're pretty strong in the team roping game. What do you think about like the current state of that, like the big jackpots they're having in Wickenburg, and I mean every corner, every day in Wickenburg is something to do with team roping. Did you ever think when you were getting in the truck with Leo at 18? Did you ever think team roping would be like that?
No, I didn't think you could win $20,000 a day. That's unheard of. I wish Leo would have got to see it and compete in it because that guy was hard to beat. Yeah. He didn't miss.
His daughter ropes pretty good.
There's so many guys now that rope good, but they don't pull it together when it's time to just keep knocking them down.
They don't got the dog in them.
When he and I make a living together, we got to knock them all down. No matter how fast you are, if you can't catch all of them, And that's what I see now. The team roping hasn't changed. There's just more people.
Yeah.
Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely. I know there's some. You touched on Wesley Thorpe, and I'm pretty partial to Junior Nogueira just because his story of coming from Brazil and stuff. But man, I just think the guys are up so good now, and if you're wanting to compete with them guys, Brandon talked about you got to have that dog in you. You got to have some kind of fight in you. You got to have you can't quit because it's gonna get tough. The road's long, and you might cripple a horse. You're gonna go through a truck. You're gonna all this stuff. You're gonna go through rodeo, and you're gonna have to have some kind of fight in you, or else it's not gonna go well for you.
Steve Branco said it best to me. He said, "If you're going to be out there in that ocean, you better be a killer whale." And that's from Pooh Bear, Steve Branco. That's what he told me. He said, "You better be a killer whale," and I've always remembered that because there's times when it gets pretty rough.
Talk to let's touch on Leo Camarillo a little bit because he's one of my heroes as well. I learned I'm kind of caught in between the old school and the new school. I remember all them guys. I remember Leo coming to my house and my grandmother making some food for him and stuff, and they'd go out there and rope all day, and then they come home and have some good dinner and stuff. But like touch on like Leo's mental side of it. They called him the lion and stuff, but I talk about having that dog, and you like talk about like back in the day when them guys were roping for a living and using your rope to make a living. Like what's the mental side of it?
There was no other than Leo. Leo had a mental game. He would make his partner believe they could move mountains. And he believed that. Walt Woodard's another one, still the great.
Yes.
That his partner was phenomenal, and he made him believe that. Now, when they were done with those partners, it may be a different story. Like Leo telling guys to get a job application to McDonald's. I mean, that's a little hard, Yeah. But as far as they put me in a truck with Leo at 18, and he would wake you up at 3 a.m. and want to talk to you. want to pick your brain because that was news at your weakest. And it was pretty amazing to see those guys play those mind games because here I was, I didn't know nothing about it, And we're like Hempstead, Texas one time, and Leo said, "We don't belong here." And I said, "What do you mean don't belong? I'm sitting beside the greatest guy in the world." And about that time, Robert Gonzalez is, 3-4, or, I'm like, well, he's right. Backwards, half head, and they're like 4 flat, I'm like, wait a minute, he was right. And then Leo was rodeo smart. He was smart enough to stay out of that circle. He'd go northwest, or he just out rodeoed everybody. And if a guy wasn't paying attention, you'd get caught up going to where all the teams were and get beat up. Leo would make the finals day in, day out, and might go off where there's 30 teams, but win first everywhere. Instead of going with his 50 teams and have to battle those other 20 guys.
You said he would wake you up and pick your brain at 3 in the
Oh,
morning.
yeah.
Well, about what? What would he pick your
You
brain
name
about?
it. What is it about this new
About
generation?
roping.
What makes them throw so fast? What are you thinking? So me, I was a little tougher to get along with. My dad said to treat him a little different, so I did. And I had to ask Bob McClone and some other guys. I said, I can't treat this guy like that. It's getting, And they said, no, we can now. You got him.
You got him on the rope.
I think when Leo liked you, it was like he would ask a few questions, but like if he didn't like you, he would definitely let you know about it. Yeah. And so like that's my favorite thing about Leo, man. Like his honesty. If you asked him a question, he was going to give you his heartfelt answer, and if you didn't like it, I mean, it's up to you.
You have a lot of that in you.
Yeah, he's like it's straight up a lot of the times,
It was funny to be around those guys because I was that new generation when I come into that circle, and Gerald, all of them were great to me, but it was hard to understand the way they did it. They did it with one guy where we had options to rope with another guy, and the roping's paid more. And like I was kind of tough on Leo because like he had a horse called Stick, and he had no hackamore on him, one of the old aluminum hackamores. So I told him to upgrade that stuff now, and I went and bought him a new one. Like, what are you thinking? But he would always pick your brain and try and see what you're thinking, because Leo was a winner. No matter where you went, he won.
So was Leo the type of guy that had a clock? I mean, we talked about like a guy like Trevor Brazil, or Cesar mentioned a few other guys, but a guy like that, I mean, it ain't nothing to be out there in the barn at 1 o'clock in the morning roping the dummy because he may have missed.
No, Leo. I mean, all of us in our industry we run our own clock. Jimmy Cooper was another one. I rodeoed a little bit with Jimmy, and if he missed one at LA, by the time he got back to Bakersfield roping 3 in the morning, he turned the lights on and go at it. Yeah. And he was a
and that has to be because in your time when you were roping this, them guys couldn't miss one today and run up to Wickenburg and win 20,000 in a jackpot. I mean that was getting you down the road.
It's like Jimmy Cooper. We come to the grapevine one time, and Jimmy Cooper's in the rest area, got all 4 wheels off his motorhome. He's just fixing the brakes before he goes down the hill.
We didn't have time to fix it before he was practicing.
Before he went down that hill, he's got all 4 wheels off his motorhome, and he's fixing them.
Yeah.
That was just, and Jimmy, those kind of guys were great to be around because you never seen any of this, especially if you lived in a normal life, because we had clocks, most people had clocks. Well, in the rodeo industry, you don't. We run 100, and say you entered 100 rodeos in that year. I mean, you may enter 112 rodeos and only get to 100, but at that time you did.
Tell the listeners about how rodeoing has evolved, and like back in the day, you used to have to pull over and enter on a payphone. And for those people that don't know what those are, the young guys won't know what those are, but that was hard entering back then. Like now you can enter online. You can just.
And now I don't even know how that works hardly the way it works.
I know, but like I mean, you're right. Like the evolution of the game is just completely done a 180.
I heard an interview with Joe Beaver the other day talking about that. He said he would have to call the house to get a trade, and he'd have to talk to their mom, and then the mom said, "Well, he'll be back in an hour or two. Call me." He goes, "Well, you can't call me. I'm gonna call you back because I'm at a payphone." So I could
we
imagine.
happened to have some people at Procom that would help us a little bit. You keep them girls' number that were at Procom, but it was different because we call you when we get there. Now people will call you going down the road. What are you doing? What are you doing? Well, back then you just waited till you got there to call. There was a lot more trust. Yeah. There wasn't so much. What are you doing? Yeah. Well, nobody. It just stops you from doing what you were doing. But we had phone bills when those cell phones come out. We had them bag phones. At $2,800 bills and stuff.
Yeah, they charge you by the minute.
It was like having a suitcase for people who don't know what those are.
Yeah, I remember those. We had them when we were farming cotton in Levine. and if your phone started ringing, your horn would start honking.
Honking.
So you were way down there starting irrigation, and your horn would start honking, and boy, you'd start tripping.
yeah.
Now that's why we were all in good shape back then.
They were hooked to your lights too, and the lights would go off and honk. I remember those.
Yeah, it seemed like a big deal. So when you made your first NFR, how many? And it might be hard to remember, but how many rodeos did it take you to make your NFR?
We entered 100. I think we entered 100. I rode with David Moats. Up to Reno, I went with Rocky, but when I started with David Moats, it was a whole different ballgame. He was all business. That's what he did for a living. And David Moats was a great teacher. And right off the bat, they handed me a newspaper and a notebook, and I'd have plan A, B, and C. And if one didn't work, you'd go to this other plan. And then I'd go to David, hey, what do I do now? You know, because you'd enter a rodeo and you may land up on one on top of the other, where you couldn't run that steer. So all the rodeos we tried to enter were 2 steers. You tried to enter those because you got 2 chances, well, 3 checks. And those guys that rodeoed for a living were always going to those 2 or 3 head rodeos, because you not only got to go around, but you get your average. So when you landed on one the wrong way, you had to come to these other rodeos and figure out what your priorities were. And the way it is now, you only get to go to 60. A little lighter program.
So how many rodeos do you think you went to the first year you made the NFR?
The first year I went to the NFR, they had I think it was a limit. It was like 55 or 60, and then it goes up to 75 throughout the years. But they've always had a limit on rodeos when I rodeoed. But there was times when Dennis can talk to you about, like when Leo and Gerald days and stuff, and Uncle George Aros, like he would tell me stories about them guys just out rodeoing. You know, they'd go to 130 rodeos.
Yeah, you did 130, and when you landed on top of another rodeo, you just wash that one out and enter another one. Like if you couldn't run either steer, you just enter another rodeo, and because you'd only count 100, so you just didn't count it.
So that's the true revolution right there, right? You had to go to 130 rodeos, or enter 130 rodeos,
right,
off of a payphone, hoping you know the girl's number over there. That's the other deal.
Yeah, you'd have. I mean, it was kind of entertaining, because if you knew the right people in the pro-com, they would tell you, when everything was going to go on, and you could enter with your priorities the way you wanted to. And sometimes your number didn't hit. Like if we used his number first, that's the number we'd use. When he went to draw bat or drawn up bat, switch numbers, and use your partner's number and see where you land there.
Like the number of rodeos, let's say 130 rodeos, like compared to now, this year number 15 hole was the highest ever to make the NFR. Am I correct? Was it 90,000 damn near?
Damn near 90, I think, this year to make the finals.
You know what
which
I mean?
is in the 80s, I think, high 80s.
And imagine how many rodeo, compared to now, how many less rodeos, how much more money. It's crazy how that's changed.
The rodeo industry, the money is phenomenal. Look at all the money. Look at what Houston paid, $64,000.
You don't have to go too many anymore when the 130 days are gone.
You gotta win.
Yeah, it just gets back to that. You gotta win.
I never did release it, but we did a video called Catch to Win. Bob Ewing and I did, and we took a couple years to shoot it, but it was all about catching to win, because no matter what you do, if you don't catch them, you don't win nothing.
Right.
If you go to buy one and you can't catch on him, you're not gonna buy him. So the whole scenario is you have to catch to win. I mean, in our industry.
Yeah. And is that something you just loved about it? Is that what got you
I love the roping part, the horse part and stuff like that. That's what I get a kick out of, because when you get the right horse and the right roper, things just click.
They just go together.
And it don't matter who's riding them. Like Sean Darnell is one of my heroes, and Sean Darnell could take those horses that he helped on at the horse shows. And when I get to get on them, man, you talk about fun to ride. And with my style with Sean's horses, it was just so much fun. Sean Darnell had the best heel horses in the world, and he would use them with the horse shows to help on, and they'd get 3 times as many runs as our horses got. And when it was time for them to come to me, or I would get to ride them, when you roped them back feet, he'd pull the feet off.
Machine. They were a machine, right?
Sean Darnell, and I hired Sean and his sister to work when I worked for Adams. That was my crew, Sean and Danielle, and they had some of the best horses. They're the best riders.
Yep.
If you guys ever get a chance to get Sean Darnell to tell his story, that guy.
We'll get him on the podcast, and one of my good friends that I help out at the Rope Horse for Charity Dakotas is a guy that spent a lot of time with Sean and pretty much raised him. You know what I mean? Yeah, and that guy tells me stuff still to this day. I've been to the finals and done that stuff, and I'm 39 years old, and Dakota's younger than me. He'll tell me, hey, you're riding that horse like shit. You're not thinking like a horse. Ride him better. Little stuff like that, and it's almost like Sean's. You know, I hear Sean saying that through him. You know what I mean? Like, think like a horse. Think like a horse. You're not thinking like a horse.
You know, you take, like Sean and I, when Dakota was around us all the time, he didn't have a say-so on what he got to get on. He rode what we asked him to ride, or told him to ride, but he didn't have no questions. If you couldn't ride that one, well, what are you going to do? You know, so you get some guys to shake a big loop out and get in the right spot, and they could set them down. And Sean was very instrumental in Dakota's life. Cord Pisano was another one that worked for my father, and he worked for me for a long time up there in Colorado, and we had a lot of fun.
Yeah, trained some good ones, because about that time, you know, you had Bar Ass. That was one of the, you know, people won't remember that horse very much, but you know, Diesel. Cord had a big impact on Diesel's career, starting off right there, and I think that you know, the horse is a 4-time world champion, and now his horse, Cord has such a good feel for a horse. The horses that he rides now, I've rode up one that he recently sold for $100,000, but that horse has the same feel that Diesel had. It's like, man, how do you keep teaching these horses how to kind of do that kind of stuff? But like Dennis understands how to do it. Like you mentioned, Sean Darnell and a handful of them guys. But man, these horses are so good. They have an eye. They know what the horse talent. They know what the feel that they're after. And when they get a good one, they can make a world-class horse.
And like the horses that Sean would come up with, they had so many runs, taking a jerk and getting they caught on them. You know, the whole thing about making a great horse is getting catches on them, getting the right runs. A horse doesn't become very finished if you don't catch on him. And he gets to take the jerk and to know when to turn in, because most people don't really know where to be. You know, a beginner roper doesn't really know where this corner is going to be, where I could end up the same spot each time. You know, if you can get in that general area, those horses start locking on. Well, then they start looking when you're not. Well, there you go. That's what great ones are.
That's what makes it so much funner when you got enough. I didn't have a very good horse, and I got one that was a seasoned horse, and it put me in the same spot every time, and that became so much funner.
Changes your outlook on things.
I love, it was the enjoyment to rope is so much better when you have a shot and it's on you at that point, just to throw it down there. And
if you got one that'll separate on his own, people might not understand what separate means, but when that horse will come in there and come off on his own, that separation is where we start to throw from. You know, it's hard to throw on when you're going forward.
Makes it so much more fun.
When one will separate, it seems like our mind registers where you can shoot, whoop it down.
Right.
As Steve Northcutt says, whoop it down there.
Whipping it down there. Shoot, it's like shooting fish on a barrel when you get on one of the good horses. But you know, to touch on what Dennis was talking about is like, I've been doing the show horse stuff, and when that horse's hind end will hit the ground, at the same time you're starting your delivery, you're able to put the loop in front of the legs. That gives you the good separation. If you're still going forward and you're throwing your loop down, then the horse hits on the front end. The loop doesn't do what you want it to, and it's hard to dally. All that it's very unsuccessful.
Yeah.
So you know, the horse that hits his hind end, we catch on them consistently. Them horses get a jerk all the time. They learn. You know, they hit their hind end when the rider is starting his delivery, and it's like teaching one to do that is to be a machine like that is very, very difficult to do. Like starting them from a 2 or 3 year old nowadays. These guys, show horse guys, are showing them as babies now, and they're showing them at the highest level when they're 4. So it's like getting to be able to show a baby to do that and get that timing. Like these guys kind of revolutionized the game, because you made the final 7 times. Is that correct? And then you were in the horse show world. You won. Let the listeners know what you won in the horse show industry.
I've won the Heelon in the Quarter Horse Association. I've won in the Paint Horse Association. I don't know how many world titles in the Appaloosa Association. They have an event in the Appaloosa where it's team roping, where they judge just on the whole run. I've won it 7 or 8 times, and then I had a horse called Miss Kitty that some friends of mine had raised, and won the Heelon 7 or 8 years in a row on her. But it was all of it is a judged event. The rope horse fraternity is now judged, which is really cool. But there's so many nice horses now. You're taking horses out of other events to bring into this fraternity, which is cool. I mean, you know of a horse called Luther that Tanner rides.
Yeah.
That may be a Frisian or an Andalusian. I'm not sure which one he is.
Yeah.
But he's an odd duck in our horse industry, and I've got to ride him a little bit. And just the way this horse thinks is different. Not like a quarter horse, you know. So they're bringing some other horses from another environment that's really cool.
Along the lines of the way the horse thinks, what do you think about like a guy? Because like I said, if I take my heel horse from the corral to the practice pen, corral to practice pen, corral to practice pen, I mean, I can see that she just is steadily getting worse and worse, you know, like, and then, but if I take that same horse and I go brand some calves on her for 2-3 days and you leave her turned out at night and you're sleeping in a bedroll and you know you go ranch on her a little bit, then when you go back to the arena, that horse is ready to go to work.
It's kind of like anything else. We all need a job. If you got a job to do, you kind of quit fooling around. Usually, if a horse has got a job to do, that horse will do his job. He's tired. He wants to finish his job and be done. As far as being turned out and fresh, the first 30 minutes is wasted time anyway. I mean, you know, especially if you ride a stud, you know, it gets worse. I mean, so really, the best advice I can say about horses is if you'll trade places with them, it makes more sense. You know.
That's
Right.
a great way to put
Yeah,
it.
they really will.
What do you think to like in the number system today? I mean, I went to an 11 in Gilbert the other night, and it was as wolfy as any open I ever watched in Wickenburg. And I don't know if that's just because maybe it's getting towards the end of the season and the boys are sneaking in, or
We've
how
got so many ropers now. So many guys sitting at home that rope really good. I mean, you've got some guys that number might not be true, but there's no more Gary Portress either. You know, and I don't know if you guys remember Gary Portress, but he was part of the number system, and he studied that stuff. I mean, you know, it was hard to get a wrong number when Gary Portress was involved. We used to call him Coach, but he studied it.
And can you guys touch on for the listeners, like, how does that number system really work? Like what determines? I mean, I think you said a little bit, you know, like if you're a 3, that's a beginner and on and up. But when you get into that 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, I mean, is that you're just winning going down the road consistently, or is that you pissed off a flagger and now he's going to bump your number up?
No, they gotta, every time you go to a World Series or, you know, some of these bigger ropens, they keep a tab on the winners, and especially the World Series. And you know, there was a good friend of mine that got raised, and he's a younger kid, he's a high school kid, and they completely skipped a number. He went from a 5 elite to a 7. You know, like they raised him, he completely skipped a 6, but he's been going to these short goes and placing the short, or not. I guess he's been having a little tough luck in the short go, but coming back high callback, second high call, third high callback, and a few of the ropens he's been finishing the job. But they raised him just merely on the success he's been having as of late. You know, and if you get to winning consistently, they'll bump your number up, because I feel like they get to where if you're winning too much, you'll get a few complaints, and that's just kind of part of it. You know, they just keeping you. Yeah.
Nobody likes to lose.
No, and especially some of the older guys will get whipped around by the younger guys. They're like, man, he's not a 6 no more. He's a 7. He ropes like a 7. So bam, they're gonna skip a number, just like I just talked about.
That changes that guy's career. You know,
Right.
when he gets a too high number and then can't go, I mean, it just stops where he was headed.
It's funny you say that. I talked to little Daniel this morning. He's a 6 now.
That's
Yeah,
what I talked
cool.
about. Yeah, like
that's pretty
they'll
cool.
jump a whole number. It's like that's fine, but that's how they judge the number system. It all on how you win. You get to be a 9 or a 10 roper. You know, usually when you make the finals, they raise you to a 10. It's a healer, 9 header, but it kind of goes on the success. And if you're a young guy that's roping really good and beating everybody up around your neighborhood over there, and your backyard ropings and stuff like that, and you can have some success at the World Series deals, plan on getting your number raised pretty fast. And that's just kind of shooting the younger generation ropers to, like, they have the junior NFRs and all that stuff now to look forward to, where when they turn 18, they're ready to go rodeo. It's like these young guys are getting groomed for it, which is pretty cool. But man, I got a good buddy, little Michael Camelot, and he's a 9 elite. He's 14 years old. He's just a
Where does
kid.
he go with that? You know,
Well, that's what I mean. He goes to a few of these things around there, and it's like he's got to go to a few of the slides, but it's strictly open roping. So you can't even compete in the 15s hardly anymore. You know what I mean? Like it's a strictly open ropings for him. And he's going this week is the Junior BFI. Tolleson-Mack podcast is sponsoring him in the Junior BFIs and the 15 roping. And so we're excited about that, having him there. But he went all around this Arizona area and whipped everybody's butt, and so he went through the ranks, and he goes to Texas and does good. And I tell people, if you can't go to Texas and Arizona and compete with the guys out there, with the Wolves and Sharks out here, like in Texas, you're not going to be able to make the finals. I'm sorry, man. Like it's a rough road, and you're going to be seeing the same guys at the pro rodeos, and they're going to be there. It's tough. You know what I mean? You can see where you're at in your roping level if you can be at either place.
I talked to his dad yesterday. His dad was telling, and I guess whoever, they were saying that they had more complaints about little Michael's number, like, you know, his lifespan or whatever, when he started roping, than anybody else. Like, everybody was calling nonstop. Hey,
when he was 11 years old, he was beating our asses at the open ropings.
Yeah.
He and that little pony that he still rides. I call him a pony. It's a little small horse, but he's been whipping our ass since he was 11 years old at the open ropings.
And Steve's kid is just like that.
Yeah. And Nicky, we talked about roping the goats and stuff. Steve Northcott's little boy, Nicky Northcott, huge talent. This is one of my heroes. I look up to some of the younger guys, but he's a cool kid. But he roped the goats and roped the dummies for the longest time. He didn't get on horses and rope until he was almost 13 years old. And then it was within a year of, I'm talking about a full year, Steve got him around the right horses and got him around the right people and stuff. And man, his healing took off. And he's the same thing. He's not even 18 years old yet, and he's a 90 lead as well.
I'm glad to see Steve hauling him around. I mean, he won't. Way to keep them kids out of trouble is to go with them.
That's because right there, they can't go to their local ropings no more, their backyard ropings no more. It's like, and they can't go to pro rodeos now because they're not 18. So yeah, it's like, man, it's tough. And like the dads, shout out to like Dennis talked about. You had a good dad. And my Uncle George, my mom and dad supported in me and kind of kept me going.
Like
that'll keep you out of so much trouble.
George has helped out a lot of people.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the coolest thing. You get the right people in our industry is phenomenal. What they've done for all the young guys. Like, there's nobody I wouldn't want to help. I mean, our sport is very cool. It's still family orientated, and you can pull in there if you need help, get help.
Do you do schools?
I used to. I haven't done them in a few years. I did for a long time. I did schools and did the horse shows and the rodeos. And it was when I got tired of the whole situation with myself, my problems, but I would do. I'm gonna start doing some of them.
Yeah.
I did 32 schools one year, and we did. I think I went to 24 horse shows and did 30 schools and rodeoed, and I don't remember much of that year. I mean, there's just too much can go on.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned, Joe Beaver. I mean, I was in charge of the airplanes all the time, so we had Randy Miller and guys like that in Las Vegas that kept us under airplanes. And Joe Beaver and I have actually pushed planes out on the runway, waiting for our pilots.
Waiting on them to show up.
Yeah,
they were a little late.
And we had the same travel agent. We had a travel agent that could get us anywhere. And it'd be the hardest guy to outrun would be Joe Beaver because he can get anywhere.
Oh man, that guy.
There is nobody that studies that game like him, and he was fun to be around. I mean, he was always up.
Yeah. Well, if you ever need a spot here in Arizona, we have arena here, steers, whatever you need. If you need to do a school here, you're more than welcome.
Plenty of crowds.
I just enjoy coming to rope. I'm blessed.
Yeah. So, as far as I remember one time I was talking to Matt Shizawa. He made the finals a couple times.
Mr. Miyagi?
Yeah, Mr. Miyagi's son. Yeah, and that guy's great. I mean, Kent's
See, I worked for Adams and then Mr. Miyagi was,
Yeah. So Matt was telling me that after you make the finals the first time, the second time is a touch easier because you kind of get into different, you get into spots and rodeos and things like that. Is that?
Well, you got to remember, like when you get to rodeo, if you look at it as a whole, you're trying to win every time. But if you look at it, when you do get to the finals, you've got 15 teams or 14 teams to beat. So if you settle down a little bit, it gets a little easier and you just rope smarter. When you got 14 guys to rope against, you get to where you want to win, and there's only 14 guys to go against when you had 90 yesterday to go against, and now there's so many more than that. There's so many more guys that could come across there and reach and rope with no consequences. We had consequences.
And not just the competing side against the people, but just the second year, you would know where you could pull off at this guy's house. Make the trail a lot easier.
Where to go and where to stay.
Yeah.
And I was always, when they said stay away from them half the time, but I had more fun than anybody else. I just did. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, you got to tell the viewers a story about how your dad would wake up all them guys sleeping in the pasture?
Well, like everybody.
Or why were they sleeping in the
They would
pasture?
go when you come to the rodeos in California. You'd go to Oakdale, and everybody. I counted 17 people on the floor of my house. Bobby Hurley, Matt Tyler, and myself had a house in Ceres, a 2-story house.
That was probably.
I counted 17 people on the floor, from Rod Lyman to North Cots to you just name it, from Tanazi. Everybody stayed with us, and when it was about the end of we'd be all at the rodeo in Red Bluff, Clovis, well, when it was time to go, my father would just flood the pasture. And they'd have all the living quarters out there, and you couldn't get out there to them unless you had a boat. they knew it was time to go. They knew it was time to go. But yeah, but a lot of people, everybody goes to California to rodeo in the spring, and they were good rodeos, and everybody went together. We used to have jackpots at all of them. My father had Arena Productions and put it all on. But everybody would stay there. We had, you name it, they were there. I mean, we had a lot of fun with the Bulldoggers. We had everybody.
You said you made it 7 times. Who's your partners in it?
I made the finals with David Moats the first 3 years, and then I roped with Matt Tyler. And Matt Tyler had a dream to rope with JD, and JD and him roped together the 4th year, and I went to roping with Bobby Hurley. And Bobby and I had been living together, running around together for a couple of years prior. It just fit. And Bobby and I did very, very well. Really good. We started a rope company together in Clarksville, Arkansas, called Cowboy Toys, and we were just good friends. He moved out there to Ceres, and it worked out very well. You know,
We asked Cesar the same question. Actually, somebody from the crowd asked Cesar, or from the viewers asked Cesar this question. What myth haunts you?
It would be my pull
Well,
now.
Caesar, I mean, he explained everything. It really must haunt him because he knew where his cinch
Oh,
on
dude.
his saddle
I
was.
still think
And
about it.
I mean, the
It
third
was-
row up, there was a lady with a red hat on.
I was pretty hard-headed. Instead of me listening to what like I should have been doing, I was doing my own thing. You know, running my head in the wall for no reason. You know, I have a very good gift, and I just want to do it my way, and there is not really that way. You know? And for me to be sitting here with you guys and still getting to ride rope, that's a big thing for me.
It's pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
That's cool.
So, out of those years that you made it 6, 7 times. We talked about what with different partners. Which partner, when you backed in the box, was your go-to man?
They were all, I had some great partners. I roped with Charles Pogue, which was unbelievable. Bobby Hurley just had a skill that no others could have. I mean, he threw his rope like a baseball. And he had great horses. He had great support. I mean, and we were friends. I mean, really good friends. But all the guys, Charles and Tanazi, and I mean, you name it, from Terry Sullivan, everybody was around. Steve Northcott and I traveled together. When his brothers went, told me to come get him. David Northcott, I took him home from Odessa, and he said, "You need to take my brother." Well, he just won the World Junior Championships, so Steve goes with me, and now he was character. We had some fun, but I'd get us in messes all the time, from running the gate at Pueblo to, we run the gate at Pueblo one time, and they had Steve pushed up against a car, poking him in the chest, and for long after that, they rush him in the secretary's office, knock the secretary's table over, and they're trying to put handcuffs on him. And I come in there and I run out there and get the president of the fairgrounds to come help us. And, I mean, it's you name it, we got into it. Because we were a little harder. We were independent, and our partners wanted us to go with them. Well, we couldn't do that. We was too cool. You know, they take their rig, and all we had to do was get in. But no, we'd take our own rig, and we'd do stuff like that. Because we'd enter the tripping up there, and Steve and I were tripping when we had no business tripping. But our partners go, "Are you coming to the rodeos?" Well, yeah, we're entered, aren't we? So Steve and I started entering up the Northwest one time by ourselves. We just entered together.
Yeah.
We were 6'4", I think, the fastest we were on the rodeo, and that's the fastest we could be.
Yeah.
And it was just, and our partners, we tortured our partners, which we shouldn't have done. You know, I mean, I tortured them guys phenomenally. Rube Woolsey's one of them. I apologize to Rube. I mean, it was just not a good situation.
For all the young healers out there, you will not get a partner nowadays if you're hard on your header.
No.
The headers are caught. There's so many really good sharp healers nowadays. You have to kind of be there for business nowadays. You're there to work. You're there to heal feet and you know, do it right. And like Dennis was talking about, some of the best healers in the world back then just did their own deal. but by golly, when the steer was turned, it was 2 feet every time, and that's all the headers really cared about now. But the game's changed a lot now.
Back then, the partners would try and control you a little bit, and that was the worst thing for some of us. We come from an uncontrollable environment, and it was nothing like it. You see them guys out there swinging my ropes out of my rope bag. Aren't your ropes a little soft? Did I say my ropes were too soft?
Yeah.
But like you said, it was all about performance. Who cares how you got there, what you did, as long as you held them down and didn't really.
Well, and that had happened. Bobby and I were at Lakeside one time, and slack wasn't until like 4 in the morning. Well, I'd been over there with some friends of mine drinking until 4 in the morning, and when it was time to run one, well, Bobby turned me one to beat, three flat, and I rocked it up in the bleachers somewhere. He said, well, there'll be no more drinking until after we rope. Well, fine, let's go have a drink then. But
Let's go get us a drink.
Let's go get
so I
us a
told
drink.
him, when it was done, let's go have a drink and talk about this.
Let's figure this out.
But it was something to see. I mean, I'd had a Greyhound bus, and our goal was we'd have a guy drive it, and he was to keep us out of jail and keep the bus running. And obviously,
Rock stars.
Yeah,
Yes,
obviously that didn't happen a couple times. I fixed that. But
You told me that one rodeo you turned a horse a different color because you couldn't shut off the bus because it may not
Well,
start
it turned
back.
to silver. The smoke from that bus turned old bar smug silver. I promise you.
And that's because you couldn't shut it off. It might not start back.
Yeah, because the starter was going out of it. We didn't want to shut it off, so it'd run for 3 or 4 days.
So back then, were you guys kind of the wild man going down the road?
I don't know if we were, but I seemed to fall into that category because first off, everybody wanted to ride in that bus, and before long, nobody wanted to get near it.
Yeah.
I hired a guy to drive the bus to keep us out of jail. That was Jerome Canales, and he was a good guy. But I had I rode him with Sean Howe, Bob McClellan. I think Bobby started taking his own rig because it was pretty wild in that bus. And we'd play cards to see who drove, and we was drunk all the time. We had to get that bus would go 93 miles an hour or something, and we never looked back.
Yeah.
You had a great time rodeoing, like you talked about, and one of the things that's not around as much anymore, but I'd like you to touch on it just a little bit. But the Playboy Mansion. Did you ever meet Hugh Hefner by any chance?
No. I run with H quite a bit. Where H lived there a month and didn't get dressed. But that was a whole different group.
Yeah. That's tell the story. I'm sure you were good friends with HP, and what was the story? He was rodeoing and didn't he stay there for?
He stayed there a month and didn't get dressed.
Yeah, like he was rodeoing doing
Yeah.
he was rodeoing doing good and didn't leave there. He stayed there and just.
Well, why? I mean,
James Kahn tried to go with him quite a bit, and I don't think anybody could keep up with H. H was a great guy, brilliant, and had a gift nobody else had. I've never heard anybody that ever roped with him or traveled with him have anything bad to say. He's a legend. I mean, he's one of the greatest ever walked. Mm-hmm. And if you'll notice, if you ever watched him go, he would go around the ring the opposite direction as everybody else. You ever notice that?
He went to the right.
He would always go to the right. Everybody else to be.
Well, Dakota talks about that, man. Them horses, they don't. We go left so much that they get to where they're not wanting to go to the right. And the head horse,
HP didn't care if
especially
they
back
were right.
then, with them steers, big open arenas guys are open. They were going to the right sometimes.
HP was 4 at the Salt Palace before fours were heard of. They would go twice in the PRCA. And Leo and them guys would not, when he'd get a lead in the world, and Leo and them wouldn't enter him. They'd leave him. He didn't care. He'd go home. No big deal.
well, you'd go back to the Playboy Mansion. I mean, if I had a chance to rope or go to the Playboy Mansion.
And if you ever get to see the videos of HP Evans, he was so far advanced as everybody else. He would use his horse for his delivery, like the second stride of his horse. He'd send that rope, and it didn't care if they went to the right, where they went. He just reached to get them. Because Leo would let one go to the right. I was at the rodeo one time, and Leo said, well, hey, son, what about that steer going to the right? And I said, just watching you, bud. Isn't that how they're supposed to go? And his reply was, well, if a man's got to go buckle, anybody should catch him if they got to go buckle. Well, David Moses, who I was roping with, David didn't catch him. Oh. I mean, in the truck, it's pretty tight right there.
What do you guys think about that? Like, I see some guys sometimes, and I heel a little bit, and I was taught by Mr. Miyagi that my job is to haze them cattle over a little bit. My job ain't just to kind of hang out back there and rope feet, I got to haze them cattle over, and I go to these jackpots, and I see these guys, and they're not hazing cattle, and these headers are having to rope them off the fence. What's your guys' take on that? I mean, should a guy give the header a good haze, or should... What do you think? Is it a team sport or?
I'll go take this one first, but man, it changes a little bit the higher level you go to. And some of these guys reaching nowadays, they want straight lines. And I wrote Begay. He's pretty cowboy. You know, he can get them anywhere, and he preferred if they were actually, you know, just a little to the right versus to the left, because I mean, he's right. The run is faster if they sneak a little to the right or even straight. If they go to the left, it just sometimes slows the run down just a little bit, and 1/10 of a second matter. Like, it's just part of it. But I feel if you're going to a jackpot, steers are running hard, and they're going to be fresh handling. If I mean, I'm kind of weird about it, but I can pick the steers lead up. If they can get in their left lead, they're going to handle a lot better. Versus when the steer's breaking in the right lead and heading off to the right, you know, when the headlight goes on, they're going to crash around the corner. Their legs are going to be all over the place for a jump or two. And so it's like, I'll let Dennis talk about it now just a little bit too. But that's kind of like the rodeo guys now, like even Dustin Negaskiza and T-Wade, they just want straight lines. They don't want you to break them as they're delivering, because they're throwing from 3 coils back, 2 coils back. If the steer breaks as they're delivering, they're going to miss real bad. The steer's not going to be there when the loop hits, because they're just by the time the loop leaves the hand to the steer, you don't want them changing direction.
Yeah, I think all of it has been a meet. If you meet in the middle, like Jake and Clay used to make the best runs farther down the arena. When Jake was a little off of it or whatever, Clay would hold that steer straight. They could blow through him down there farther, be faster than everybody else. I think that had a lot to do with it. When them guys go to pushing them, they'll have themselves up there in such a position where if that header doesn't help them, they can make them look pretty stupid. You know, they have no shot when they're up there that high. And like you see a lot of guys doing that nowadays, and they don't know why they're doing it. Well, when you start helping your header pour long, that header ain't getting there anyway. You know, his horse starts cutting him off. But he put himself in such a situation where there's no shot to throw at, which shuts down his percentages. And the whole thing is raise your percentages up. You know, that's a big issue. So the more you help your partner, the more trouble you end up creating.
Yeah, some guys like it, like you talked about. It just depends on the header. You know, like some of the headers that I roped with that had good success, it was straight lines. Don't break him last minute. If he breaks and out of the chute and he's kind of headed a little bit left, just keep him in that straight line. Don't let him change. You know, start left and go back to the right. You know, or go to the right, and then about time he's delivering, shoot him back to the left. It's just kind of like, it's just personal. Whatever the header likes, whatever the head horse likes is. That was one reason Begay told me to lead him out to the right. He had a head horse that didn't work as good when he went to the left. So he says,
you know, like, it's funny, Bobby Hurley ropes the same steer every time anyway. You know, he visualizes the run before he ropes, and he ropes the same paint steer every time he backs in there.
a good one, right?
Yeah, we had a steer Tucson one time that outrun everybody before, and we ended up winning the day money on him, but they didn't get our time the first time we roped him. We had to bring him back, and we run him the second time, run the same run. You know, but Bobby Hurley he roped the same steer in his mind. That's what he visualized. But if you've got a guy that his horse can't get there, we'll push one to the left.
Yes,
You know?
absolutely.
That's how that started. When a guy couldn't get there, you'd want to help him because he wasn't going to get no farther.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, you're trying to get out there to get him to kind of check up a little bit. And
Just
I
help
guess it
him.
goes both ways, huh? I mean, I guess it's the
It
machine that they're riding.
What really
Yeah.
helps is the communication from the guys that's
Right,
roping.
exactly.
If you communicate with that guy beside you, there's 5 individuals trying to rope as one. You know, and if you can't get these 2 guys to communicate, it's pretty hard for them to communicate with what they're riding and the steer they're roping.
Right.
You know, and that's pretty deep. I mean, that's a lot of hours in the pickup.
Yeah.
And I'm sure those hours in the pickup have to pay off for that, right? I mean,
Here's the problem. Nowadays, nobody goes with each other.
Yeah.
Everybody's got their own living quarters, their own truck. Used to, 4 of us get in that truck, put money in the ashtray, and you rodeo.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and you shared your runs, you talked about it.
Yeah. Well, like Peyton Bray, he posted something on social media the other day. He wrote with Brenton Hall. These kids grew up together. They had success in the American back when they were just teenagers, you know. And he posted, "I really like our run." And these guys have worked hours and hours and hours in practice and communicated. You know, they know what the head horse likes, the heel horse likes, and they like their run. And that if you're going to compete with the best guys in the world, and Junior Nogueira and Caleb Driggers, those guys are 2-time world champs. Like, you better have a badass run that you can catch at the jackpots, rodeos, whatever. It's the same. Yeah. It's kind of similar, but like, you know, Begay called it controlled aggression. When you can make a good run and it's controlled but aggressive, you're going to win a lot of money.
And see, like the rodeos, it's all where you got what you draw your steer, so you kind of got an idea of what he does. and those good steers get better, and the steers that don't get caught get worse. So when you get those good ones, you have to take advantage of it. That's how you start dominating. And you're going to draw battles every now and then. You just have to go get him. But if you draw 3 batters in a row for long, you're biting your head. Why ain't you catching? Your horse isn't running, and the guy goes to switching and making these decisions that should have been made if you just stayed on your game. That's a big thing. Mental game you're talking about.
Do you see those guys in the back sometimes, them headers and healers kind of get into it? Riding out the bottom of the pin or this or that. I mean, I know you can't do it in front of a judge because apparently they'll fine you or whatever.
2 things you can't talk about is wipers or open. It'll cause you little problems in that vehicle.
Yeah, it's going to be a little issue.
It'll cause you a partner swap
Yeah. And you don't even
within
know
the
it.
next rodeo. It'll happen that fast. Like it's pretty sensitive stuff. You got to kind of pick and choose your times. You don't want to, if the healer hit one in the ass right there in the short go, you don't tell him, hey, good shot, Cowboy, right there when you're riding out the back end of the arena. He might not take it very good.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You might want to give him a few hours and see that he's kind of he's cooled off and he's eaten some dinner. I remember Coulter Todd, man. He's as good a Christian cowboy as I've ever been around, man. He's straight. Don't curse very much at all. And man, excuse my language, but we had a steer not give us a good go over there in Salinas. He actually was going down there and circled back and come back past the eyes back to the team roping boxes as we're kind of approaching him, and it just kind of took us out of the rodeo. And it took him a minute. It wasn't none of our fault. We got plus 10. We ended up catching the steer. It was too long place, and we're fixing to catch a flight. We're on our way to Cheyenne, and it's been a couple hours. And he says, "What the fuck was that all about, man? That was such bad luck, man. Like that wasn't even fair, man. Like we didn't have." And like I said, it's having a partner like you. I never said nothing about it. Like I was just like, man. I was like, we're here together, man. And we're sitting next to each other, fixing everything. What the hell was that all about, man? That wasn't even fair.
Yeah. The best thing I ever seen was Ricky Green and Doyle were roping together at Camarillo one year, and Ricky crossfires one and doesn't catch, and Doyle looks over at him as he goes to catch him and said, "We need to change." And he said, "You want me to head?" And I'll never forget that. There is partners, and sometimes the partners and opponents are the same guy. Because a header can make you think things ain't going on.
So you were telling some stories about that Greyhound bus going down the road. I mean, what year was that?
That would have been like 80. That was back in 88, I think. A friend of mine built bikes for Honda motorcycle, and he had a bus that was really fancy. It said Team Honda on it, and he repossessed it. And he called me after I wanted it. Well, it was a $90,000 bus at the time, and I asked Bobby if he wanted to have interest. I could buy it for $40,000. That's pretty cheap for a bus. And he said, "You know what you buy in Clarksville, Arkansas for that kind of money?" So I bought that bus, and we took the Team Honda and put a blue mule all the way across from tire to tire, and away we went. And
Thus the name Mule Train.
There you go.
it needed a governor, and it didn't have one. I mean, I drove it nonstop to Fort Worth. First time I get it, I ran out of fuel 45 minutes from my house on the freeway.
You got a fuel issue.
And yeah, it's kind of my, I think I can make it. I always thought I could make it. So the next morning we're in Las Vegas, and I hear this air horn honk, wonk, wonk. It's 7 a.m. and here come that bus. Brian Humphrey, a friend of mine, brought it to me, and I get in it and drive all the way to Fort Worth. And I drive to Arkansas, pick up a new trailer, and come back to Robbie Schroeder's house, and I got Sean Howell and a new driver with me, and I shut it off. I didn't know them brakes. I thought the brakes would lock. I didn't even question it. Well, that night I feel us moving. And I look down the hallway and the steering wheel's turning. And oh my God! We hear a bam, and that new trailer is right here beside my window.
Oh.
So we just laid there and everybody stayed in the bus. Well, next morning we get out. We're like 12 feet from Robbie Schroeder's door. We had rolled backwards in his front yard.
Oh no!
It was quite a deal. And I hadn't rode a bus in school, which I didn't ride that very often. But it was pretty fun. I mean, yeah.
Well, I mean, back in the '80s, I mean that right there is changing the game, right? I mean, there couldn't have been a bunch of Greyhound buses.
No, there was only
down
one.
the road.
There was only that one. And,
This is after you already made the finals one time.
Yeah,
Twice.
I made the finals a couple times, and a friend of mine in Oakdale, Jerry Griffith, had built that bus for Honda for Freddie Spencer, a race car driver or a race bike driver, and I had to have it. I took my dad for a ride in it, and he said, "You don't need this." Well, that just made me have it.
Just made you wanted it even more.
And I hooked an inline trainer behind it, and that was quite an experience. But
Well, that had to be a picture.
I drove it like a rental car.
Yeah.
Just pull the hand throttle out and play cards, and and drink. And
Do you have any pictures of this bus, man?
yeah, I do. I got some at home. My
You're
mom's
probably gonna
got-
have to send us once we put it on this video.
My mom's got some. She's got a lot of pictures of things I don't even know about.
Yeah.
I mean, you would not believe some of the stuff I got myself into.
I could imagine.
I was.
Well, we sure like hearing about any of it, I can
Oh,
tell you
yeah.
that. That's obvious.
I take my girlfriend's mom's car when I'm 15 and a half years old to Fallon, Nevada to a jackpot. Her mom was gone. Take her with me. She's just 15. Totaled that car on the way home. Got 2,777 miles on it. And when I get to the house, my mom, she's mad. Where you been all weekend? She sees a little blood on me. She says, well, oh my God, what's wrong? It looks out the door, and I got a tow truck hooked to that new car. I just paid him to take me home.
Yeah.
I went like 1,700 with the rope, and I didn't have a driver's license. I didn't have nothing. Just my poor mother. I love her dearly. She had her hands full.
Yeah.
My other side of my family was pretty cowboy, pretty western. Pete Criner's my uncle.
Oh, okay.
You guys know Pete Criner's.
Yeah.
I can't even say what they say. I mean, they're just good people, and I'm very blessed to have the people in my life. They were cowboys. That side was cowboys.
Yeah.
My stepfather was a cowboy. My real father was a horse trader.
You were telling us some stories earlier that you used to sneak on down to see your dad.
I started sneaking out of school. My mom had a lady live with us, and I'd get her to write me notes to get out of school. Nobody knew it. So at the end of the year, they set up.
And you should have been a politician.
Hey, they set up over home looked like a football. My mom said, "Look at this." This gal living with us, she wrote up me notes to get out of school noon every day. So I started driving to school. My mom said, "You ain't driving." "Yeah, I am. I ain't going if you ain't driving." So she had to give me the keys if you want me to go to school. The lady would write me notes, and I'd end up down at my dad's. And it was a couple months before she said, "I hear you've been down there seeing your dad." And I said, "And?" Just like, what are you going to do about it? And she told me not to give him my heart. And I think I was 27 when I apologized.
Yeah.
She was right. But that was, yeah. I got down there and I would rub goats. I'd rub goats in the backyard. And when I started sneaking down there, when my dad just put me on, well, that's what I've been doing every day in my backyard. So it was the same thing, except I had insurance, so I got to get on all the bad ones. I didn't know that at the time. I would knock them out of the way and get on them. Well, I was the only one who had insurance. And at that time, he rode through a lot of horses.
Yeah, you rode a lot of horses back then.
And most of the guys that roped with me would take horses with them, and they may ride them for a couple months and get to winning, and as soon as they get to winning, my dad sell them.
Yeah.
Like Trey Pope says, "Why does your dad always take my horses away?" Well, what's he do for a living?
Well, that was a very smart business plan by your dad to let them guys that were doing good.
And if Jake Barnes would haul one or pick one up, well, Jake Barnes hauled that horse all over the world. That was another, not to say that bad, but that was a sell,
The sales pitch right there.
No, I think that was a great business
Yeah.
plan. I mean, if Cesar calls me and wants to take my horse, let me help you load it up,
Yeah, and then Cesar hauled that horse all over the world, the rodeo with it.
Right.
That's
Yeah, the thing is now you just get them insured for, say the horse is worth 50,000, 100,000, you get them insured. Both parties are taken care of, just in case you go rodeo and he breaks a leg out there in the middle of the run, you can get some insurance and kind of replace the horses. It's hard to replace the rodeo ones, but if you got them insured for 100,000,
Sure helps.
you can get close anyways.
For sure.
that's a good. I mean, it only costs you $600 a year to insure one for 20,000. And that's a cheap investment, especially if he's not in your control. When you put him in somebody else's hands, there's no telling where that horse ends up or the problems. All you gotta do is let a novice take that horse and tie him to a panel.
Yeah.
I mean, anything like that, it creates a problem and you don't even know what happens. With that insurance, it's a blessing. Because a guy rodeo don't have the money to replace that horse.
Not like that.
Big deal.
Do you think there's big benefit into letting some of them guys take your horses, use your horses, ride your horses?
Depends on the guy
It's
and
got to
the
be the
horse.
right guy, of course.
And I think if it fits, if the horse fits him, it's different. But just because he can ride him doesn't mean the horse should go. There's a lot to being able to say that horse is ready, and that has a lot to do with the guy that's riding the horse. As a guy not knowing, I think there's a problem with the lack of knowledge. It's say letting a green horse go out on the road. They don't get rode. They're just sending that horse out there, and the guy that's not winning on him is not going to ride him. I think that has a lot to do with that factor.
We asked the question earlier about horses, and that's kind of something that I would have asked Dennis a few times, rodeoing, and Brandon helped me out with that a little bit, but then he quit rodeo and I kind of got trying to do it on my own a little bit, and that was tough, but he touched base on that. I had a few young horses that were really talented, and I tried to, make a living on them and take them to the rodeos and stuff, and they just mentally couldn't handle it. You
Cost
know,
you
it's
money.
just like it's yep, and they step by the corner or not stop in the right time. But you know, I call it, you know, it's different. But when you're going out rodeoing and stuff, it's like going out to battle. You need a horse that's like a Navy SEAL type. You know,
You
you
need a
it
horse
tough.
that's been through the mill.
Yes, you need.
It's looking when you're not.
Right, and so like some of the younger horses, it's just like they haven't gone through the Navy SEAL training. They're not ready to be out there. They're not ready to be a warrior yet. They're in a year they will be. So like Dennis talked about, like some of them, you know, Don would send some of these horses out there with Jake, and he, you know, keep him for a year. And after that year, he might make something that's going to be a big dog type horse. But like it's a tough deal. Like I feel like you got to match the talent of the rider and the talent of the horse, and then they can win together. But if you have a horse that's not as talented as the rider, you're gonna run into issues. And same thing if the horse is more talented than the rider, you're definitely gonna run into some issues.
You know, Cody Wildwing has a nightly rodeo, and them guys all during the summer get to go to a rodeo every night. If you could get a horse down there, there's one of them guys that rows pretty good and could rodeo every night. When into the summer, that horse is ready to go. So you could get a fresh horse when nobody else could. Because when you're into the summer, you're both worn out, your horse and you. So if you could get on a new horse that was still that you could win on, well, you just step right back up. You're still back ahead of the game. Where your horse was wore out and you couldn't hardly get a shot off of him. But once you got a new horse, you're still dominating. Yeah. And that dominating is when you get to make money. Because if you don't make the top 5 in the national final or top 5 in the PRCA, you didn't make no money.
Still to this day.
You know,
that's how it is.
You're still breaking even because you've got $50,000 of entry fees, you've got $50,000 of expenses. You ain't making no money if you only won $100,000, right? So I mean,
Exactly.
you had to make those top 5 are right there, and you're relying on having a good finals. You don't want to have to do that.
Right.
Like you said, Houston.
It's a lot of the guys are relying on the NFR. Like Big A. Last time I had a conversation when he went there the last time. And he was short. He had to sell some cows. You know, he was a little bit behind it. He made the finals. You know, it's like one of them deals. He's relying on making a living right there at the NFR. It's pretty tough deal. We live a tough lifestyle. Yeah. I think if you love it, you can be successful at it. But you got to have that dog in your shark, or else you're not gonna make it very long out here.
Like Houston, you know, it's 50,000. You know, those 50,000 back in those days, those rodeo was never paid 50,000.
6,000.
That's what I'm saying. Like, what was one of the biggest ones that you always look forward to going?
We always looked like right here at Tucson. That 2-back roping that George put on was winner take all, and that was one of the best ropings there was because, I mean, even though you had to win first, who ropes for second anyway?
Back in those days,
You know,
guys.
I've heard guys ask, well, what's winning fourth? Well, I never did quite understand it. Who's winning fourth? Because I never did want to win fourth.
Yeah.
You know, they don't give no prizes for fourth.
Right.
So I mean, we had 2-back. One year I won it, paid 16,000, and that was back then. That was a big roping.
Yeah.
You know, BFI didn't pay that much back then. I mean, they had. I want to say Cow Palace was. One year I went to Cow Palace. I went to Cow Palace 3 times, but one year, like we were tied. Jake and Clay and I were tied, like right a couple $100 apart. And we win the Cow Palace, which gave us $5,000 lead going into the finals. And we had a $5,000 lead, which was a big lead back then. And I remember my partner ruptured a disc in his back on the first steer. I'm the only guy that's turned out the BFI, turned out at the NFR, turned out, you name it. And the rodeos wasn't my fault. I didn't turn them out. Rube I did one time. I shouldn't have did that. But BFI, I roped with Freddie Chavez one time, and he had to go to the hospital. And I'm sitting in the healer's box when they call her name. And then Bobby and I turned 2 or 3 steers out to the national finals. They told me to get another partner, and I wouldn't do it. I said, we started together, we'll end it together. And Bobby come back, and we did really good. But we went second in the world by $200 and some.
You said you got turned out in NFR. Your partner got hurt.
My partner ruptured a disc on his back, and we helped him off his horse. The first steer, we got a $5,000 lead. Jake and Clay are 4-7 or 4-8, and we're 4-7 on the first steer, and Bobby can't get off his horse. He called me Donk. He said, Donk, I'm hurt. And I'm like, what's wrong? Well, he had ruptured a disc, and he was going to not compete the rest of the week. But we got some specialists. Mr. Hurley had some specialists come in, and we ended up finishing. We ended up turning out 2 or 3 steers, and we lost the title by $248 or something.
After you turned out 3
And it was,
steers.
I went to Jake and Clay and told him what an honor it was to spend the year with them, because we battled every day. I mean, every day. We were up second partners together, so it was pretty fun, you know.
When you were going hard back then, what was the sponsor situation? Was there a sponsor situation?
Sponsor was a friend that had a little extra money, you know, something like that. But that's when sponsors kind of started. I remember somebody bought the yellow horse of one of the guys up there from Idaho, and I think they get I think Service will give $100,000 for him or something, and they split that sponsorship up over 4 years. But as a sponsorship, we didn't have many logos or nothing like that. We just didn't, you know. It really changed when people got behind the people. I mean, it's a neat sport to sponsor. But as far as sponsorship in our days was just a friend that had a little extra money.
So, somebody that had a little extra money maybe help you get down the road a little bit.
Yeah, and really we needed. If you weren't winning, it's pretty expensive. Wasn't it?
Very expensive. Like I tell people, you can spend $5,000, $10,000 in a week, especially 4th of July time, with entry fees, the fuel, the flying, everything it gets very, very expensive fast. And think about that. I mean, you got $5,000 to $10,000 in fees, and you don't win that week. Gee, you're going to 10 rodeos, 12 rodeos in just 1 week. You're hitting in 7 days. You're hitting 12 rodeos up. I think is what I hit up.
And you talked about like jumping on little planes and going here and there. Was there ever a time where like you talked about pushing the plane out on the runway, but like a pilot didn't show up or cost you?
We have been in a situation. I mean, funny thing I was going to mention, like Tyler Magnus one time, we were going to Prescott, and he wasn't having very good luck, and he's throwing his rope bag over. He threw his rope bag over the bed of the truck. He'd had enough. And then as soon as we got the rodeo, he's looking for ropes. T. Woman one time we're at Pueblo, and T's throwing his ropes over the fence. You see ropes going over the fence from behind the center. 1 rope, 2 rope. About that time, a little kid walked over and said, "Mr. Woman, can I have your autograph?" And he stopped throwing his rope. And he, "Yeah, sure, son." And as soon as that kid turned around, he's back. Come on. You know, I mean, the mental game was just crazy because it's tough on a guy. You know, your wife's at home and she's wondering why you ain't catching, and your horse is thrown a shoe, or you got crippled when you're borrowing somebody's horse, and you're entered at 7 more rodeos. And if you don't go to them, you get the fines. Yeah. You know, I've had more fines than most.
How was the fine situation?
Mine got pretty expensive at certain times. I've had up to $4,000 or $5,000 worth of fines. When you turn one out, you get to turn more and more. Before long, they won't let you enter.
Yeah.
You know.
Were you buddies with some guys down on the other end of the arena, the rough stock side?
I was buddies with everybody. I was friends. To this day, I have Jeff Copsa just come to my house the other day, and that's NFR bullfighter. You may know Jeff Copsa.
Well, if you watch our first podcast, we were sitting here talking about the best guys that never made it, or never got to go down the road and make it. And I brought up Jeff Copsa.
Jeff Copsa comes to my house every now and then.
I think Jeff Copsa was the best bullfighter to do it ever.
Really?
I mean, I do, and I watched a lot of bullfighters in my day. I watched a lot of bullfights in my day, and he took the best of everybody. He took the best of Joe Baumgartner, and then he took the best of Rob Smets. And I mean, he was wild enough to be Rob Smets, but smooth enough to be Baumgartner.
See, this guy, I mean, I see him quite a bit. He drives truck now up there in Sonora, and you know, he spent 30 years in Globe, and that's a tough town to live through. And he needs a little confidence in himself. And I tell him all the time how good he is. I had him rope.
Well, have him watch the first podcast, because I talk about him. I bring him up.
I had him rope the other day, and he just said, maybe I'll just go to work, start riding horses, you know. And he doesn't. He just needs to think more of himself, because he's a great guy.
Yeah, and I mean, that guy wouldn't recognize me from somebody else.
He went in Tucson 7 years in a row.
Yeah.
You know, and a great guy. Was married to Debbie over there in Globe, Levine.
Yeah, he worked at when I knew him, and this was like when I was like 17, 18 years old. When I knew him, he was working at like a rental place or
When he's living in Globe down there?
Yeah, when he was living in Globe, like an equipment rental place. And I remember he'd have to take time off to go rodeo and this and that. And I always thought in my mind, man, if that guy could ever just get somebody behind him where he didn't have to worry about paying the bills or worry about his wife, boy, you could just buy a house in Vegas.
The kind of guy he is. He draws crooked nose, or he tells them
Best bull ever.
He told them, don't even draw Crooked Nose, just give him to me. So they took Crooked Nose out of the draw and give him to Copsa. And then he said, oh boy, he said, he went to Rob Smith and said, what do I do now?
You know what Cubs did to that bull, Crooked Nose? And if you go back on my personal Facebook, probably 2-3 weeks, I put a picture of Crooked Nose up, and I said, if you don't know this bull, then lower your voice when you tell me your rodeo stories.
Right.
Because to me, like that, like you should know those kind of
That's
bulls.
true.
And when Cobza drew him, or I didn't know that part of the story, but Crooked Nose had big old crossbred bull, and he had one horn, and I mean it was rank, and he didn't have a horn on the other side; it was just a nub. And everybody that freestyled him went to the muley side. I mean, you're just naturally going to go to the muley side. Cobza went to the horn side, and this bull didn't know what to do. I mean, he did everything but just trip, fall, and give up. I mean,
It sounded like a train coming at him.
yeah, and I mean, that was the baddest bull there was. And again, in my opinion, the greatest bullfighter that ever walked.
That's awesome. I mean,
I really do. And I think, just kind of, that's funny you bring that up. It was on the last podcast, but that shows what guys look at, like this guy talking about you, Brian talking about you, Kyan talking about you, everybody we called. It shows the admiration that we have for you guys, and sometimes it's hard for us to get across, right? Like I'm not going to go flag Jeff Cobza down on the road and tell him, but I think it means something, and it's important for us to tell you guys,
because when this sport's over, a guy there's a lot of different things go through his mind of where he should go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, like you said it. I mean, you said it earlier better than anybody I've ever heard say it. Like, it's pretty easy to be a big fish in that small pond, or, to be a shining light around them guys, because you've had a little light, and sometimes that makes you go down the wrong path.
When you get to your driveway and not know whether to go right or left, you're kind of like, which way do I need to go here? I know I can't go back where I was.
Yeah. Well, that's so cool that you know that guy. Yeah, we talked about him on the last
I love
show.
that Jeff Copsa shows up. I love him to death. I mean, he's welcome to my house forever.
Yeah, where he lives down there.
He lives in Sonoyta. He works for Clay Hart,
Oh, cool.
and he's got his CDL. He's driving truck, and he's pretty. Once you get to know Jeff, he's a kick, boy.
Yeah.
I'd give you anything. He's big hearted.
Yeah, I remember him being so nice and stuff. But like I said, I was pretty young. I didn't really hang around him much.
But he's a cowboy, all the
Yeah.
way. But he's a good guy.
Yeah.
But when you talk bullfighters, that's what comes to mind. There used to be Rob Smith, but Cope's not been around. He thought different.
Yeah.
He can fight him.
I was over in Stevensville. A friend of mine, Andy Dobson. Do you know? I don't know if you know Andy, but he got a place over in Stephenville, and I was there, and they're just having a little team roping jackpot deal, and I was standing there because they have a bar up above the arena, and naturally I was sitting in the bar with my unofficial sponsor Crown, and I looked down there and I'm looking at the guy running the steers. And it's Rob Smets. And I kind of, no way, that can't be Rob Smets. I thought maybe I had too much Crown, I don't know. And I finally went down there and talked to him. And man, to see a guy like that, I mean, you just don't run into Tom Brady at the Circle K and just get to talk to him, like it's cool for us,
Nate, was he selling trucks down there for?
Maybe he was. I don't know. I was talking to him about just,
That's a good
stuff.
friend of mine too. That's a good guy.
Yeah, he was super cool.
He is a neat guy.
Yeah, and he was just, running steers up. His buddy, I said, how'd you get stuck running the steers up? And he said, oh, my buddy puts on this rope, and I wasn't doing nothing tonight. Okay, so I can just call Tom Brady if my kid's Pop Warner coach don't show up,
Rob's a class act.
Yeah, that's pretty cool, And same with you, man. We've heard, man, that guy's wild, but he's a good guy.
I still a little wild, but it's just my nature.
Well, there ain't nothing wrong with that. There ain't
Yeah,
nothing
but,
wrong with a little wild.
Tanner Baldwin, well, in my eyes, he's one of the young talents of horse
Tanner's
world.
as good as they get.
And he said, he gave you so much love, and I know coming from him how much he respects this game and all things about horses. He's like, you're the top of his list as far as that. So.
That's very nice of him to say. He's my neighbor, and I love him to death.
Yeah.
His whole family. And he can handle it.
Yeah, no, he's a real deal.
Tell him about what he says when you miss one. You're just a farmer.
I'm a farmer, I guess that's a bad word for cowboy. They call you a farmer, I guess I'm a farmer, so I do something. He'd say, it's all right, you're a farmer. So then I learned a farmer's not a good word.
Farmer's not a good word. They used to call Mike Beers a farmer too, though. Remember that?
Okay.
He was a farm boy, they said. But you put Tanner on that ball face horse of yours, and he's pretty untestable.
Man, yeah, he does a good job with them, and he's same way. he talks about thinking like a horse and developing that feel, and feel their feet, feel the left front foot, the right front foot, the hind legs. If you can feel them, then you can set the horse up for success. If you don't, if you have no feel for a horse, it's hard to train a horse.
I think that comes down to trading places with him.
Yeah.
He's you have to trade places with him. If you put yourself on all fours, how would they get you to do it?
Yeah.
That's not a lot to it.
I think Tanner likes the training side of it, getting the horse's head kind of more than the roping. I mean, I would see him a lot more with the rope on the ground, just, we'll do the riding part.
Roping's the easy part.
Yeah.
The riding's is the part that we don't spend enough time with.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I've been preaching in my my clinics and stuff is the rope is secondary, your riding's primary. If you can ride your horse to that spot where you rope the dummy every day and make it easy on yourself, you're going to catch a lot more. If you're not putting your horse in that right spot, it's going to be sometimes impossible.
Get out of his way.
Yeah.
You got to get out of your horse's way, and if you can get out of his way, he'll do. You'll see a lot of horses that come across. Guys will ride, they won't pin their ears back, and you could get on him. Say you get on him and just get out of that horse's way, and he'll pin his ears back and do what he does best. Now, if you take that horse at home and turn him loose with a cow, he'll do the same thing he did with his ears back. And if you could get a horse to do that. Bobby Hurley had a Palomino horse called Bar Smug. They told me that this horse would make runs without a rider. And I'm like, oh yeah, right. Well, one night I'm in the barn there, and they kept him in the arena. They fed him in the header's box. And this horse was eating in the header's box. I promise you, I saw this. And I've seen some things that weren't there, but I saw this. But that horse, when he got that eating, that horse backs in the corner, and I'm by myself in the barn, and they'd all told me he'd done this. That horse backs in the box and then blows out there and just blows left. And I had to run call somebody. I said, wait a minute, I've seen it now. And Bar Smug would literally do that on his own. Yeah. And that was an awesome sight to see a horse do that.
That would be cool.
Yeah. Do you think, you kind of touched on some roads you went down you shouldn't have went down, I mean, I know a couple other guys that went down some of those similar roads. Do you think when you guys get back to the horse, you get lost in the horse? Like that horse, if it's you and one or you and three or four, and you're just kind of out there in the barn with them, like you said, you've seen that horse do that, and nobody else would ever believe it. But it doesn't matter because you've seen it, and you've seen that horse do it. Do you think the mental side of that really helps you guys out?
Well, until I saw it, I didn't believe it. You can't tell me. I know that was a great horse, but until I saw the horse do it, if I told you that my horse was loading the trailer like whistle at me, you're like, oh yeah, right. Well, we're not the one on Bandit. Yeah. His might do it, but I think anything for the inside of a horse is good for the outside of a man, or vice versa. Horses save lives, and I know they have mine.
Right. When you came back from off of the roads, you went back to that horse, and was that a big help of your recovery?
Horse saved my life.
Yeah.
And it was just horses in general, because I didn't want to be around people. And if you've been around enough horses are just like people without the alternative motive.
Yeah, that buddy of mine I talked about that's currently on vacation with the state. He was the same way. If I could get him rounded up, I get him kind of half tricked into going and eat lunch with me, and then we go get on the horses and rope. Man, he was good for a while, because he'd just get back and I always said, man, if I could just trap that guy up, like if I could lock him in the corral next to the horse, he'd be perfect.
And I've seen that happen. I've seen when people do trap people and save their life, but it takes the way the industry now is with the things that are out there for people to get involved in. It takes a family member or somebody to snatch them up and has to fight for their life. I mean, and literally fight for their life.
And that's what it becomes is a fight. I had another friend that lost his battle to drugs, and man, I tell the story all the time. One minute this guy's laying on the floor building a Barbie kitchen with my daughter, and I would leave him and he could take her to school or whatever, or I picked up his kids from school, and then man, he'd just go down like it was like the freeway with that guy. He'd get off the wrong exit, and that dude was gone for 2 months.
I had one of my closest friends in life. He died year before last, but he was an enforcer for some people, and he worked for me, ran with me for 3 or 4 years. And one time I'm looking for this kid named Tori, and I couldn't find him. And he goes, "You don't know, do you?" What? He said, "Well, he's in that room tied up." I said, "What?" He goes, yeah, I was going to feed the horses tonight. And I found Tori out there waiting until it get dark. He's going to steal a horse and ride to Lahana. I said, what are you talking about? He said, he was going to steal a horse and go see his girlfriend. And I didn't want to get him in trouble with the law or anything, so I just snatched him up. He's still tied up in there in the room. And he tied to a light. And I said, Brian, you're serious. This is Brian Bogus, a friend of mine. He said, well, he started to say he's sorry. I said, you're kidding me, right? And an hour later, here come that kid out of that house, and he come shook my hand, apologized, and he saved his life because he was out there. And this Brian, this was a dear friend of mine. He wasn't no joke.
I'll tell you, and I mean, I think Brian may have the right idea, because when I was sitting at Cash, my friend's name was Cash, when I was sitting at his funeral, I was thinking there was many days that I should have tied him up in a room, you know, because I mean, I yelled and screamed at him, and he yelled and screamed at me, and we got in fist fights, and we did this and that, and I mean, there was a time I should have just roped him, tied him up, and took him somewhere.
Right.
You know, and it's, I don't know if that's our culture, and that's just because we're all half kind of hard-headed, that, you know, we're not the people that you can send and let somebody talk to him on the couch, because, you know, we kind of
Intervention isn't going to work.
No, I'm not a strong believer in that. I mean, I'm sure it works for some people, but
This guy would snatch him up in time. He did that. I mean,
it sounds like that guy's got a future in rehab.
I had this guy drive for Jake. Well, he's dead now, but he drove for Jake and I, and we ended up sending him home at Las Vegas. He was going to fight a guy for $5,000, give us the money. And Jake said, "What?"
Just liked it, huh?
He goes, "What did he say?" I said, "Were you asking?" But I said, "Yeah." But get a fight over in Vegas, take us 30 minutes. You ain't won nothing 2 weeks. He gave us.
It'll be fine.
Jake said, "We don't need this."
We don't need the 5,000. It ain't gonna go towards our winnings.
He went to work
anyways.
for Adams's. That was Big Brian that worked for
Oh,
Adam.
okay, yeah.
Yeah,
Enforcer.
he dropped he ended up calling me one night at 3 a.m. He just got slipped out through the cracks of jail, and he wanted to get out of the state. And I put him to work for Brandon Adams down there, and he gets pulled over one day, and the cops said, "Welcome to your new life. They've got a non-extraditable warrant for you out of California. They don't want you back." So, and he did. He ended up going to work for Bobby Boyd. It was funny, and become a vet tech and run the vet clinic for 13 years for Bobby Boyd before he died.
That's pretty cool.
And then this guy was the most dangerous guy I've met. He broke my front teeth out, broke 4 ribs on me. So, believe me, and we were best friends. I mean, but it was an issue that damn sure was fun. Yeah, they called me into the clubhouse one night and beat me up.
What did you do, yo?
I told a friend of mine I'd take an ass whooping before I give them that copy machine they wanted back to do things they shouldn't have been doing with. And so I got one.
Got one. Yeah.
That was a pretty rough time though. He did beat the brakes off of me. But he didn't get his copy machine back till later. When I got healed up, I said, "Come on, let's go back down here and get that copy machine." He said, "You ain't got it." Well, we went right back to where they went to get it. And I told her to bring it out here, and she did. And so man said, "Ma'am, I was here to pick that up 10 days ago. How come I couldn't get it?" She said, "Could I have got it from your family?"
Hey, that sounds
That
like
guy gave me a hug, and we went. But most people wouldn't have been that easy.
Right.
Yeah. And that was a dear friend.
Like, there's more people out there than you think.
And you had consequences to your actions. You know, you didn't have a sponsor or that kind of unlimited sponsors where you could make the same mistake twice. You make the same mistake twice, it costs you. Where another guy might have, it don't bother him, just back in there. What do we got? Where they just keep throwing. I roped with one guy, I won't say a name, but I think he missed 11 in a row. I said, "Bud, you think you might want to just catch one of them?" You know?
That's not the deal nowadays.
You know.
The headers are going at them like as hard as they can. And if, like, I roped with a kid by the name of Lane Ivy, he's, you know, started with Coulter, learning back in the day, you average 1,000 a rodeo. If you got 70 rodeos to go to, you should make the finals. You know, you try to win something every rodeo. You're trying to hit them for at least 1,000. That's kind of what the expense is to get there and everything. You're trying to hit them for 1,000. Well, Lane, he says, or we can win first at 7 of the biggest rodeos. I mean, we can win Reno, we can win Cheyenne, 7 of the biggest ones, and we make the finals that way too.
Right.
Well, you got a pretty damn good point there. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's wrong.
no, I mean, the numbers add up, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
But there's not many guys can handle that.
Yeah, mentally though, that he was a gamer at the bigger ones. Like, he would really, like, you would notice that kid would, like, he was making the short
Here's
goes
someone
on
like
big
Bobby
rodeos
Hurley
and
the
stuff
same
like
way. I said, "Bobby, this steer runs." He said, "Good, we can pass on this one."
that. Yeah, I mean, I don't have to see much
You
of a
know,
start. I
most
can
guys would
I
say-
can nod and go.
Yeah.
And most
Sweet.
guys are, "Oh man, well Bobby said, we can win the day money on this one," you know, when he's outrunning everybody else. And he could knock her back there and throw it like a baseball.
Yeah, you talked a little bit about that when some of your partners, they all come off of ranches, Coulter, War Bonnet, Derek up there catching the wild ones, and Cesar kind of touched it. They like them like
They
that.
weren't getting away, man. They were gonna get caught.
I like that story, Coulter and the bear, where
Yeah, man, that's so funny.
Grandpa's.
What happened?
Oh man, this would be a good one for the story if we rock and roll.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, the Coulter, he's pretty cowboy, man. When I went out there, I was
Pretty cowboy?
I kind of consider myself a city kid, man. I grew up right there in Tucson, right there in the hood, and then just going and living with Coulter in summer times or spring break, whatever. I try to get out there as much as I can because he'd rope all the time and shoot. We roped antelope. I remember one time we spotted some javelina, you know what I mean, and we picked one out. And he stuck it on it, and I come around there, and I heeled it 2 feet. We set this javelina down, man. And he went over there, and he earmarked it, you know what I mean? So if you ever seen it again, he earmarked both ears, the Todd mark, I know. It was pretty cool. But one time he's out checking cows by himself, and he's like that. He likes to go out there and just think. He's a big thinker. So he's out there cowboying, he said, and he's just out there thinking and riding. He said, looks over the corner of his eye, and sees something kind of running black. He's got a bunch of black cows out there, so he thought it was a calf. And he said, that's a bear. And it kind of run into an opening in the pasture right there, kind of like a side hill, kind of opened up. Well, he gets out, he goes to it, and the horse thought it was a calf too. When it gets the pin in his ears, gets to running toward this thing, and he's hauling butt. And he gets about a coil away. And he says that horse kind of smelt it a little bit. He said he's falling down, kind of looking at it, kind of shying away. Well, he sends it, and he said he ropes it off. He ropes the off shoulder by the leg, and he dallies. And he says when he wasn't really tight. The saddle wasn't just super tight. So when he gets a dally like that, kind of pulls the saddle a little bit sideways. Well, the horse kind of goes to humping up. Well, he tries to let go of the rope. Well, the rope gets kind of halfway stuck underneath the horn. So he's in a wreck. The horse is kind of bucking.
With the bear.
Yeah, and the bear. He's got a 40-foot, 50-foot rope. So that bear's back there and so he said he gets bucked off, and about the time the rope gets loose too. You know what I mean? At the same time, kind of the wreck. Well, he goes to stand up, and shit, like his knee, his leg ain't working. His knee's kind of sore, like it hurts, and he can't move. So he backs up next to a mesquite tree, and about that time he's thinking about what's going on. I should rope the bear, all this stuff. I just got bucked off. And he's cowboy, but he gets bucked off. It was a pretty good wreck. And so he said them dogs. He's got some really good dogs. Well, they're circling that bear, and they bring that's kind of what they do at their ranch. They bring the calf back to him. They bring the bear right back to him. You know what I mean? And so he pulls out his pocket knife. He said, if he's got a little case pocket knife, he pulls it out and he gets it. And he's sitting in his hand. It's fight to the death. And he's running right at him. Them dogs are bringing this bear right to him. And he says that he just right there. I don't know. The bear must have seen him, spotted him, and about 20 foot away. He said 25 feet away, and the bear headed out. But he had his rope with him. He's still dragging the rope. Well, he calls his dogs. Finally got the dogs come back, and he's like, man, he kind of hobbles up over there to his horse and gets up on him, and he'd ride him back to the house and trying to figure out what kind of story he's gonna. Coulter never loses rope, dude. This guy's not. He shows up over there without his rope. His grandpa's pretty smart cowboy. Real smart guy. He almost like a John Wayne type guy. Kind of talks to you like that a little bit too. And Coulter's like, rides up there and he's bummed, his knee's all banged up, he can't hardly walk, you know what I mean? He says, what happened? He said, oh, I was walking underneath the tree and I got my rope hung up on a branch right there, and he bucked me off and lost my rope, and so I just got back on and come back to the house. The old man, he's like, oh, all right. We called him Pop, Pop was like, all right. And so it was about a week later or so, Papa, he's a big thinker too, and he always cowboyed. Was over there checking cows, moving cows around. Over there where they're at, them cows get up on the mountainsides, and they got to move them down to the bottom to the drinkers and certain things like that. So they're riding all the time. So Papa comes up there. He sees, puts that rope. Coulter's messing with something around the barn over there. He's still kind of banged up, and he walks up to him on his horse, and he's got his rope, throws it down there at his feet, and he says, "You might want to tell me the story, what happened to where this rope was on, son." And so Coulter told him the whole story, and he laughed. It's a pretty good story.
That's a great story.
It's a pretty good story. He said it's a good thing I found him though instead of the game wardens, because they'd have been they don't over there too where he's at. It's in season, and if you'd
and the javelinas with their tag on it.
Yeah, I know. I mean, we roped that antelope and all kinds of stuff, but Coulter's he's got the best cowboy stories, man. Him and Bigay, they get to talking about some. They guys have been in some pretty good wrecks, man. Some really good wrecks.
Good man.
How about the story you told us a little earlier, Dennis, kind of off screen, and I wish we had one of those cameras that could film the whole thing, because, man, that was hilarious the first time you told. It's going to be good this time, but you said some guys, or somebody stole the saddle from you or something?
No, I had a friend of mine that some saddles disappeared from a guy there in Oakdale, and a friend of mine, I told him, I said, "Hey, you guys see any saddles out there that don't belong where they're at? Snatch them up, bring them home." Well, they brought me 5 saddles before none of them were the ones we was looking for. One was Daniel Green. I mean, we've gone back to Daniel Green, my dad. I mean, they snatched a bunch of, even brought a generator home. It wasn't the generator that was stolen. It's funny to see that. Yeah. This same guy went to work for Brandon and then also worked for Bobby Boyd. He was a good guy, but he was one you didn't mess with. And he went to jerking them saddles out of that neighborhood where they didn't belong. It was funny.
No, nobody had a problem with him jerking them saddles out.
Nobody had a problem with this guy for nothing. Brandon Adams loved him. I mean, he became the ranch manager there at Randon's. And he didn't know much about farming, but he figured it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, Brandon told me about that. He lives up there back when they owned the ranch, and I think they still own the ranch in Craig. But he just live out there and hang out there winters, and it's way up there in the mountains. And this guy would take care of everything out there.
He was such a guy. He was a gentle giant, but in his time to be a giant, he was one of them.
Yeah.
He beat me up pretty bad.
Did he go? Was he rodeoing with you or just?
He drove for Jake and I for a while.
He drove for you guys?
Yeah, he drove truck for us, and he was just a great human being. And he'd never been in our environment. His environment was a lot worse than ours, and he took care of a guy named Ron Rocha. And Ron Rocha had trailer parts and more out there. Happened to mount like Liddon Cowden. Liddon Cowden went 2 back on this guy's horse, and they told me that when Ron Rocha died, that Bigfoot was looking for me, and he finally found me. And they wanted to know what I did. This guy was a killer or something, they said, and he wasn't. But he had some cars he wanted to get back to Rocha's daughters, and we did that, and then he started hanging out with me. And I'd give him some ropes that night at my house the first time I met him, and he got pulled over on the way home and they had a flashlight in his car, and they said, "You're a team roper, huh?" He said, "Yeah, I've been roping with Dennis Gatz," and the chief of police happened to be taking lessons from me at the time, and he said, "Me too," and they ended up telling him, "Go ahead and load your stuff, have a nice day." He came back next day, "I need some ropes, bud." He said, "I got all the kids roping over in Modesto."
Yeah.
It was funny.
So he was pretty excited to be able to drop your name in them stack of ropes.
Saved his life. Yeah, saved him going to jail because he was good. He was yeah.
Speaking of ropes, what kind of ropes did you use back in the day? What
I used Cowboy toys. With Bobby Hurley and I had a deal with Kurt Matthews at the time, and we started a rope company called Cowboy Toys. Bobby and I did. At that time, Denny Watkins had the Moneymakers there at Classic, and we were buddy. First off, Bobby was roping with Denny to start with, and then when they quit roping, well, Bobby and I, we still buddied with Denny and all them, so we had a deal with Kurt and Denny to make Cowboy Toys. We started a rope company, and it did very well for a long time. But I used Cowboy Toys. First off, before that was Rocky. I used Rocky Mountain. Stephen Geisler had Rocky Mountain Rope Company.
I know Steve Geisler real well.
Yeah, well, that's just started with Stephen Geisler, and
yeah, he took me. It's cool. We went on a tour. He showed me how they dip it and the wax and everything, and they twist it. They got the little machine that.
And see that started out. Those machines were a cable twister. Actually, my dad had a couple of them to give away, but those guys did that, turned that rope into an art.
Yeah.
Very much so. I had a guy stay with me a little bit. Kip Farnsworth had Ryan ropes here, that he made a pretty decent rope, but he's no longer in the rope business. But I used Cowboy Toys is what we did. And now I've been on the Cactus team for quite a long time. When I quit rodeo, I didn't call them or nothing, but Cactus was really good to me. Yeah. And the other day I saw Barry, and Barry said, "You never fit off of it. You just have to call."
Yeah, when you go in the feed store now, and I mean, there's aisles upon aisles of ropes and ropes. And
Different colors, sizes. It's amazing.
Yeah.
And see, the rope, when we had a rope company, I had an idea that started, we had like go from California with me, Arizona with Clay O'Brien, Colorado with Tanazi, and to Arkansas with Bobby Hurley. I thought that would be a good combination to go that route.
Yeah.
With Kurt Matthews making the ropes, it was easy. And Bobby's dad got involved, and they picked me up at the airport. We went and started Cowboy Toys. It was Ray Black, myself, Bobby, and I. And we had it quite a few years. Yeah. I used to, and that just comes to another story where we used to put on bachelor parties, and these girls would have Cowboy Toys jerseys on. And
Now, these are the stories they put me in here for.
yeah, the bus that I had, we'd load them up in the bus and take them out.
The same bus.
Oh yeah.
Man, this bus is where
You had to see
we
it.
gotta
You
get
had
a
to see it.
bus.
The mule train, bro.
Yeah, we gotta get a bus with a
You had to
mule
see
on the
this
side of it.
At that time, that was a pretty fancy. It was all oak. I mean, it was oak wood, and it was pretty fancy for us. And we would take the ambassador out on tour with the bus and come back, and the girls would come down with that Cowboy Toys jersey on. And,
Well, it's all right. I mean, that's all entertainment. Sounds like to me.
I had a 2-story house in town, and if I put on one bachelor party, I put on all the bachelor parties.
Well, there.
Might as well. I mean, you got the bus. You're the one.
That or a dice game, or I had a brother-in-law that was pretty handy from Vegas. Yeah, he's still alive.
Yeah. So if we need him over here to have us a
But
dice game.
he's the redheaded stranger from Virginia, and he lived in Vegas a long time, but he could throw them dice. Happened to maybe be in that movie 21.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Buddy Rose is my brother-in-law. He's a great guy.
Yeah.
But he'd come over to my house and have dice games, and he would just go for it. We had more fun at my house than anybody.
Sounds like the bus in your house is the place.
I had
to
a
be.
neighbor lady that she owned a beer business there in town, and she's about 78 years old, and she said she drinks like a chicken. One drink and she'll lay. She said. It was good. When we'd leave, I had a roommate named Mike Gomes that would take care of our house, and he kept all the girls going. We had a lot of fun. Rubels and Corey, they lived with me when they was younger. We had a lot of fun. Everybody stayed there.
Yeah.
It was
Who's the best team roper ever come out of California?
Best team I've ever come out of California? How would I say this? I can't say anybody was really the best. As far as I'm concerned.
We're not very political here. We've
They
been
were all
talking
great.
about bachelor parties.
They were all great. To me, Sean Howe might be the best I've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
Sean Howe, I mean, when he's probably the best I've ever seen. Sean Howe could get him. He and I would use the same rope. I would use the other end. He'd use this end because he'd get him so short. I mean, we rodeoed together, but Sean Howe could do things like nobody else. If you had to put us all on the same ride, he would be faster than us.
That's pretty cool.
And he is.
You were telling us earlier about like the Hurley training program and everything, and why don't you walk the viewers kind of through that? How that
Hurley's had a training program that was run by Dale Meeks. Dale Meeks and Bob Hurley Sr., I guess, were the same age, but Dale Meeks was the founder. I mean, he was the one man behind the horses. They had a program where they would take them horses and use them in they had a box pen there, and they'd run these horses around the box pen, get them started, and then they would go in there and start roping cows. Well, they made them horses take a jerk different than everybody else. These horses would they roped the cows around the neck, and that horse would have to use his hind leg because of the jerks. And after a month of them getting a jerk where that horse would protect itself naturally, Dale would get on him and run up to the hip and rope. And Dale would use a real little loop, and he'd rope there real close, and when he'd rope, them horses would naturally get a hold. And Hurley's had the strongest horses in the industry as far as strong as a saddle horn. Those horses, when you see a horse get pulled downhill by the saddle horn, you guys know what I'm talking about. Robert Scoggins might have been he had a horse that would get jerked downhill a lot, a black horse. On our barn was painted, and it looked like they had the picture backwards.
Yeah.
Where that horse was getting
jerked down.
yeah, but Hurley's never had horses that were weak. The strongest horse to the horn would make the steer easier to rope, faster to rope because that horse was so strong. When it went from the horn to the horn, those steers went wherever that horse went. And Hurley's had the strongest horses. The Bar Smug and Buster were two of the greatest horses I've ever seen. My dad had some of those horses years and years ago, some of the first ones, and they were all that good. I mean, all of them were the best. They worked great. Their training program was different than others because they trained rope horses. They didn't train reiners or working cow horse. They trained rope horses. And like I want to give a little credit to Mike Meeks, which same age as Bobby. Bobby was a great world champion, a great roper, but there's a guy named Mike Meeks that never got his chance. And I tell you what, Mike Meeks could get it on him. I mean, could get it on him as fast as anybody in the world. And when his horses get to working, well, Bobby would go rodeoing on them horses too, you know. But he was good.
And do you think there is a big difference in that, like a guy that's, I mean, obviously there's a difference how you train the horses, right? But I hear a lot of guys, you know, wanting to heel on some horses from the reining side, like the, you know, the washed out reiners or whatever. Hey, if you're in Texas, pick up some of them washed out reiners. We'll heel on them when you get back. But what you're telling us is those guys train them horses to rope. I mean, that was their job.
They train their horses to do what they were supposed to do, not this other activities. Because you can take a washed out reiner and may have a long time getting him out of the patterns that he's in. Mm-hmm. You can take a great reiner that's doesn't have no problems and probably go right to roping on him. But you've got a horse that has some hot spots. It might not be as easy to make him do another job that he's doing because he's got in trouble for doing something else.
Right.
You know.
He was kind of like what was that movie, Seabiscuit? Got so tired of running in a circle, it didn't know he didn't know what it was like to be a horse, so they let him run straight and he figured it out.
Man, I like the reiners. They got a really cool feel, broke wise, but you have to show them the cow. A lot of times they have no idea what a cow is, and they'll be running down there just broke and pretty, and they just run smooth on by, not even know the cow was even in the arena. So like that's pretty important to like nowadays. I've noticed that the rope horse futurity guys now, when the futurity first started, it was like that. Hey, let's go buy this rein and reject. We'll make it into a rope horse. Well, these guys are taking it. They're taking it to a whole different level now. They're training these horses as babies, 2-year-olds, and get them started for strictly team roping. They're getting them broke and riding around just like the reiners. They're teaching them how to work the cow like the cow horse guys, and then they're roping on them.
Is that more work than you think doing that straight?
It's no, because in the long run, the horse is set up for success. If you can get them broke and teach them what a cow is and teach them where it's fun, it's like Dennis was talking about. Them suckers will just kind of do it themselves after a while. They like it, and they're not dreading what's happening out in the arena. They're not worried about the box. They're just out there having fun. And if you can get a horse to have fun, that's bred to do it. That's where you're gonna go win at all these ropings and stuff, because the shot is there every single time. They understand where to be. But to train them to that point, that's where I'm learning and finding out, like hanging out with all these, Dennis talked about it, like we get to spend some time with like Brad Lund and a few of these guys. And like you learn so much about the horse and how to ride the horse.
These guys are riders. I mean, that's all they do is ride. Yeah. And they can ride. I mean, I was involved with Robbie Schroeder, and he could do things that I've never seen anybody do. Take the first ride on a horse and just trot him out, you know. And you'd think, wow, just to see him do it. And it was nothing to him. But then you try it, and you need somebody to come help you.
No.
It's like he was thinking, like we talked about, he's thinking like a horse, and he had to feel, you know, he can put every single leg down. He was feeling that. And it's like, man, if you're wanting to be successful nowadays, you have to find somebody that's been around these some good cow horse type guys, or you know, Dennis talked about some of these older type gentlemen that have been around the game a long time and rode thousands of these horses. You will learn something from them guys. They got such a good feel for a horse and understand. And you know, talking about the Todd Ranch, Coulter Todd, I remember it was. Rooster Todd would get some of these Mustangs every now and again. He'd take them, you know, just needed some outside money, but he'd take them, and he wanted them pretty wild. And I remember he got this one, they backed into the round pen, unloaded this Mustang, and by the end of the day, he was riding around bareback. Like he had a halter on him, he was turning around bareback. You know, the horse trusted him, loved him, but he didn't want the, you know, it's almost like he says every now and again you get some that they mess too much and they put too many bad habits in them. And like from that right there, we went. I roped an antelope on that sunbucker. Was chasing antelope on that thing. With maybe 2 weeks after they had to unload him, it was just completely wild. You can go ride him and swing your rope and chase stuff. After Rooster knew exactly how to get that horse going, and for being completely wild to being able to be broke and rode 2 weeks later is pretty impressive.
Well, they have Travis had a program, an accelerated training program. Did you ever see that? He's got a video on YouTube where him and Jesse. They had an accelerated training program where they could put twice as much on your horse in a period of time. It's pretty good watching.
It takes some time and understanding, but like you can, I mean, they got what is it, Road to the Horse or something? Them competitions where you watch them on TV.
Oh yeah.
Excuse me. Those people understand horse really good, and if you can skip so many steps if you understand what the horse needs, and you can avoid so many problems. And that's what I'm learning in roping and stuff. It's like if you slow down and you show the horse the cow,
slow down. We try and hurry.
Score, just let the horse understand and don't rush them, because eventually a horse, I think, is a very, very smart animal. They figure it out after a while.
They all want to run too.
Yeah, if they want to please you, they want to, they kind of, especially you can make it fun for them, man. It's kind of exciting, and they're gonna go try to help you out. But if you make it too much of a job,
Just like a human.
just like a human,
If you make us hate it, we won't do it.
There's this lady brought one over, and Tanner, I was talking to her while he was riding her, and she's like, I've had this horse at so many different places, and what Tanner's able to do just in that day, she's like, I've never seen this horse act like this. And it's a lot to do with the person on him, and it depends on how the foundation of when they started him and all that stuff. So
it's all in the approach has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, and tell me if you believe in this, but I mean, we kind of use the saying around here that lions run with lions. So if you're somewhere roping and everybody there's, I mean, 6 and below and 5 flats, I mean, you're gonna rope up, or if you're doing something in life and everybody's doing good around you, you want to
succeed.
Yeah.
Talk to the listeners about the Popeye Bolting House and the crew of guys that when you were 18 and kind of trying to figure the game out to make the finals and stuff, the crew of guys that you were around, and the names he's going to mention are just legendary.
They're the Lions.
And so that's how he got to get to that level, is because he was around that kind of caliber. But talk about Popeye a little bit.
Like Popeye Bolting House he was one of the greatest that I've ever seen. He had ways about him that his horses worked different than everybody else, and the proof was from T. Woolman, Rich Skelton, Johnny Phillips, Jake Barnes. It all started Popeye and Don Beasley. Don Beasley, if you do homework, is one of the greatest.
Oh, yeah.
And Popeye and Beasley roped together, and they lived in Cherokee, Texas, and he had some of the best horses I've ever seen. You couldn't find a better guy to learn from, and he loved to teach, still does to this day. I spent 4 years down there with him, Ken and I, and Jan. The lady there, Jan Yates. She made barrel horses, and she'd ride 8 or 9 a day for the grandkids. You'd go to one of the gymkhana or something. She'd have 9 kids out there, grandkids out there riding horses. I mean, it was quite just an exceptional place where Popeye had the best horses in the world. He had put a lot of time in it. He'd always teaching somebody to rope, and just like Rich Skelton's one of them, Jake Barnes, T. Woolman. And at the national finals, when them guys are roping at the national finals, when they get done, they call Popeye. Popeye tell him what he thought, what he needed to do.
that would be pretty cool. Huh?
This guy's one of the greatest. He studied it and loved it. At one time I sent 2 drivers down to pick up horses, and we'd turn around. Popeye's got them in the shop teaching them to rope. I said, damn it, Popeye, leave him alone. He's teaching them to rope. Well, they didn't learn.
Let them take care of them horses and
These
drive.
kids didn't have a clue, but they was taking lessons in there. But they lived like, I think it was 11 miles off pavement. And you got way down there, and it was quite an experience.
What
Awesome.
what would be your suggestion for like a young guy coming up? Not a Michael Camelot, but like a guy wanting to get into it that maybe he lives in town,
Find somewhere you could ride.
Just ride.
Well, riding's most important. The roping will come, but if you don't learn to ride, you're trying to rope and then ride, and you got to learn to ride and then rope.
Yeah.
Because you got to ride to your spots when you get there and then rope, or be prepared to rope when you get there. I think that has a lot to do with it. And there's not a lot of places a guy can say, "Hey, can I come ride with you?" I've did some lessons with guys one-on-one, and they don't know what to think when I tell them to just saddle up, get on the scope of ride. They got the rope with them and the glove on, and they're ready. Well, there's a big difference when you learn. You just learn how to ride your horse, or how to slide your reins, or if a horse doesn't understand one way, you tell them, try another way. They just can't learn the same way. Every horse is different, just like a person. And he may tell it better than I, or vice versa. A horse is the same way. You can't tell them nothing, but you can show them a lot. And I think that has a lot to do with it. So I would advise them to find someplace to ride, and then rope. And then everywhere you go, where there's riding, there's roping anymore. You know, and when it doesn't make sense, don't use it. People tell them something that doesn't make sense, don't use it.
Right.
Dennis picks up a good point right there. Like if you're a city kid and you're wanting to learn or something like that and you want to get better, them places need pin cleaners and they need people working chutes and getting around there. Like if you're around that atmosphere, you will pick it up fast. And
It's real simple.
say like there's so much room for, like, I mean, horseshoers, dentists, stuff like that. I mean some of these helpers, they get to go all across the country. They spend time with these horses and get them ready to show, and it's like there's a lot of you just need to get around the right guy, like Dennis talks about. You
gotta
get
find
around
some
people that
place
ride and
There's
got horses.
action.
And I think be kind of open-minded that when you walk in there and you want to hang out with guys like you guys, you ain't gonna hang out on Johnny Ringo. You're gonna hang out at the Prefert, or you're gonna hang out on the rake. But if you show me that you're good at the Prefert and you're good on the rake, we're gonna help you too.
They're gonna if you try a little bit, guys will help you. If you'll just try.
Because that is one thing I've learned about every single, pro guy that I've ever met, or, like Mr. Miyagi, or, Shizawa's dad or whatever. Man, if you just show them that you got a little heart, oh boy, they're willing to teach.
What can I do for you? What can I do today?
Yeah, they want to show you, and they show you weird little things like, if you adjust that stirrup up a hole, you're gonna swing your rope a little better, and things a normal guy is never gonna think of, like you said, this guy's got his rope and his glove and he's ready to go, and you're just gonna say, let's go out.
Yeah, put all that stuff down.
Put all that stuff down. We're gonna go ride a circle around a creosote bush for a little while, like Cesar
I've got
said.
a guy at my house that's been helping me a little bit. He was supposed to build some stuff for me. And I've been teaching him rope. Well, he never has a rope for ridden. So I skipped steps 2 through 6. I just put a rope in his hand and got him on. And he was doing pretty good. And the other day I had him head some steers. And I think he whipped this horse across the head with his swinging his rope. This horse bobbed his head and took off lunging. And down the arena he goes, and he runs so hard to run the steer through the fence. And he stopped, and he's locked on the saddle horn. And this horse turns around, he ain't unlocked yet. And here he come back to the header's box as fast as he could. And I'm going, hey, look up, look up, look up.
Yeah.
And finally he looked up, and he got on his face. I said, you're all right. He goes, I don't want to ride this one no more. I said, bud, you just learned more right there than any of these others you've been on. And he said, I don't know about that. He just, it just freaked him out. But we don't think about that. The consequence, I pushed him a little hard and thought he was okay. Well, I needed to slow down and let him ride a little bit. But
You think he was freaked out? What about the horse?
Oh,
The
yeah.
horse is more freaked out.
Yeah,
man.
he tried with me. Next time I got on the horse, he tried with me. And
Or how about the steer going through the fence?
He went right to the pits. I mean, right to the pits. And I got laughing. Where I was from, whenever you got wrecked, it was kind of funny.
Right.
But he said, I don't want to ride that one no more. And I said, well, right now we'll just start over.
And that's another thing too. You touched on it mildly, but I mean, you guys got pretty thick skin. I mean, I've seen that Kent Shizawa get on some people that even I had to take a deep breath and walk away, because he wasn't yelling at me, but he was dang sure yelling at somebody
That's a
else.
good point.
I got
But that thick skin gets you to that next level. It maybe puts the dog in you. I guess,
Could be,
like
it could be a
Cesar
lot
said.
worse. We've seen, we was all cowboys, and we thought that when somebody gets a wreck, it's their own fault. You kind of laugh at it, or $1 or
Because Cesar laughed about Coulter getting in a wreck over that bear as soon as he knew his buddy was
I
okay.
laughed, yeah, 'cause he's laughed at me so
I
many
got
times.
to tell this story. One time we was all at the house, and this little girl come in the barn, and she picked out a horse for my dad. He said, no, hon, he's too green for you. She said, I want to ride that one. Her dad said, Don, that's the one we want. Well, the horse come from David Gill, weighed 1,400, big horse. So she loves him around, backs to the box, and my dad says, score this steer, he'll trip you. She said, no, I want to run him. He said, Don, go ahead and let her run him. So he popped the gate open, and she went up there to go rope him, and sure enough, steer clips her. In slow motion, this horse kind of rocks and then rolls over on top of her and squashes her. There goes her dad off the catwalk. He runs about halfway. Don, call an ambulance, call an ambulance. And he runs over and he gets her. He's got her by the head. Don, call an ambulance. He's patting her like that, getting a little wind to her. And we're following my father, and he's eating peanuts. He's walking, he's eating peanuts. He looks over at her, and she had wet her pants from the horse squashing her. And Mom man said, looked like to me she had too much to drink. To me, and turned and walked off. And we couldn't hold it. Oh my gosh. He never weakened. He looks to me like she had too much drink. Turned away the other direction. We laughed. It was bad to laugh, but
Didn't listen. Tried to tell her.
Yeah,
and
but
he did. He told her twice. Twice he told her not to ride that horse. And I think there was a lawsuit eventually over it. But
I mean, that's a lot to this lifestyle, right? You got to be a little tough. Like, I mean, when did that story happen?
That was quite a while ago when
What do you think?
I was younger, 20 years ago or so. But
Yeah. So, I mean, 20 years ago, and you can sit right here and remember that horse
I
weighed
never played.
1,400
I never
pounds.
played as Dave. You know?
You know?
Horse company David Gill, yeah. And last year I happened to get in the best wreck I ever had. Then I had Keith and Harvey, or the Jacob.
If you guys can't see, you can't see, but Dennis's wife's over here on the side. As soon as he said you got in the best wreck, she says, "Yeah."
Hey, I mean, we was breaking some steers for I think Rudy Clark or something, and they stretched one out, and I said, "Good run, guys." And I stepped out there to take the head rope off, and this mare I was riding, she was a little western, real western, and I stepped off to get that head rope, and I hung my foot and the rope, sit on the horn. And when I stepped off, that mare pie-yawed at the same time, and this foot never touched the ground. When I stepped off, she just took me with her, and around the arena I go twice.
Whew.
I'm dragging, but I hit the fence once, and it knocked me around, and I come around again and hit the catch pin, and I come loose. But I never in my life had seen a wreck that happen. And all these guys are sitting there watching me.
Nobody went out there and roped it, or
Couldn't get to me. They didn't
No
have
pickup man
couldn't get
inside.
to you.
it happened so fast. I mean,
There wasn't a pickup man inside.
I
Yeah.
promise you, when I stepped off, I didn't touch the ground before that mare had me on the go.
Man.
All I could think of was, this is how Butch Jacobs got hung up.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
got
same way.
drugged around the parking lot.
And I had been in a lot of wrecks, but that one right there, I looked like I'd fallen off a motorcycle on the pavement. Wide open.
How long ago was that?
That was last year? 2 years ago?
Son of a buck.
I had,
Where'd the mare go?
she ended up going to Shelby Stevens, I think is where she went.
Yeah.
But I wanted to keep her, but I couldn't ride for a while. I mean, it wiped me out.
Yeah. Was she good to rope on before that?
Yeah.
Just
But no, when I got her, she was, nobody could get, they couldn't get her out of the trailer when I got her. She stood in the trailer for 3 hours. They called me and said, "We can't even get her out of the trailer." These guys did, so I went to the neighbors, and sure enough, they couldn't get her out of the trailer. I crawled through the window of the trailer and tapped her on the nose, and she got right out. But they couldn't get her out. She is a Bronco.
that was a good one, huh?
I've had some Broncos. I took one to Salinas one time, bucked for 19 seconds on the first steer. Next morning, they had a picture of a sweatshirt of me and that bucking horse. And the second go around, I saddled him up 7 in the morning. 6 in the morning, got him saddled up. And David Motes goes, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "You gonna ride him again?" We went the second day money on him.
Well, he's warmed up now.
I had me a Coors Light to the track I went at 6 a.m. Slack started at 7.
There you go.
He had been unsaddled the whole night.
But we raised this horse, and he turned in, and I didn't. I kind of hung me a foot in him, and he squalled and bucked, and I couldn't get him pulled up. Next morning, that T-shirt with a picture on it.
There you go. As long as you got a little something off the merch, that's all that really matters.
You
I
talk
guess.
about getting that horse. I have a buddy of mine that he knows nothing about horses, nothing like that. He's just a feeder for us. So one day I said, "Hey, load up this horse and we're gonna come pick it up." And hours go by. He didn't show up. This horse never happened. So Terrence said, "Call him, see what's going on." So I call him. I said, "What's up?" He says, "I can't get this horse loaded for nothing." He goes, "I even wiped the boogers out of his eyes. I've done everything." He said, "I still can't get this horse to load." Old Duck.
Oh yeah.
Shout out Duck. That's a funny story.
How about that guy? That guy's a great guy. What a great asset. He came from Arkansas.
Yeah.
Duck did.
Yeah, North Carolina.
Oh, was it North
Yeah,
Carolina?
Tar Heel. Yep.
Yeah, he lived next door there.
Yeah, he's our full-time feeder, Tanner's full-time feeder over there, and all-around handyman. So
Did Tanner tell you guys about the pony? Then he
No.
came over one day, he wanted me to load a pony in the back of the pickup. He said, "Can you load this pony?" I said, "I can load that pony." He said, "Really?" I said, "Yeah, I can load him." And so he got up in the back of that pickup, and I jumped that pony in there, and when he jumped in there, Tanner falls backwards, and out the pickup he goes and doesn't turn loose the pony. And he pulls the pony out with him, and that pony lands on his head. I mean, it hit him right on the side of the head. I mean, we thought we killed him. I mean, Tanner broke his tooth. We laughed. I said, "I told you I could load that pony." He said, "Man." But when that pony jumped in his lap, and it was slick on the floor of that truck, and out the back, Tanner went, that pony went right with him. And I mean, landed on top of him.
Did you ever go rodeoing anywhere with stock racks?
With who?
With like stock racks on your truck?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I lived in Globe. I worked for BB Rivera 3 different times. If you lived in Globe, you'd have your 2-ton truck or something to go up them washes with.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we see some guys. I think Derek's got one
Derek's
with
got
stock
one,
racks.
And
Down
my
there in
dad-
Wilcox, we see
The Ben boys, the ball.
them Clump boys. They
Brandon
got
Ben.
some. Yeah.
My dad had a bunch of them, and like when we loaded, my dad one time sent me to. We was going to Reno, And I got Big Shaw and Mark Shaw with me, some boys from, I think they were from Louisiana. And my dad said, we had 4 big horses with us, and he said, go by the sale barn, pick up them 12. And I got a 24-foot stock trailer. 12 didn't sound right. So I said, how am I going to load them, Dad? He said, take you a 5-gallon bucket and pour on the floor of that trailer by the door and load them. Okay, I'll do what he says. So I took that 5-gallon bucket, I poured it on the floor of that trailer, and here come them 12. When they hit that wall, wham, they went to the front and closed the door.
They just slipped right on.
I had 12 of them just mashed in there and loaded our quarterback out. Them shop boys had never seen nothing like that.
Yeah, I seen a picture the other day, and there was just some guy. I mean, he's probably like an Indian cowboy from out there at Fort McDowell, and he had stock racks, and he had this horse loaded. Man, they were calling. People driving down the road going to Payson were calling everybody inhumane, all this stuff and this and that. And I just wondered, back when you were doing it, I mean, that was pretty standard.
I had one kid had 17 studs on one trailer one time. Clint Cullum was his name. We called him Pee Wee, and he had 17 studs on one trailer. And I mean, he had them all snubbed up, and you couldn't keep them from fighting. I know one time myself, was going to Hal Earnhardt's from Freddie Chavez's, and I had leading 3 studs and riding 1. That was pretty entertaining. Freddie was talking about it the other day. He said, here comes Dennis, and them studs are all thrashed and trying to bite each other, and I'm riding one of them.
Yeah.
I'd have them snubbed up and snubbed the other one. I was not in a very good state of mind, probably.
Probably.
And how about shout out to Tex Earnhardt? That guy was like the original Arizona OG. Everybody knew
that
him.
was a good guy, and still is a good guy. But.
Yeah, and I never personally met Tex Earnhardt, but I can tell you I was at the finals last year there in Fort Worth, and Bill Flick was over there, and it says it ain't no bull. Man, I kind of wanted to get a little mad about that. That's an Arizona saying. I feel like that guy stole it from us.
I can remember the commercials. He's on the big old steers.
Yeah, big old steers and stuff. Yeah.
See, Hal had a buckskin mare that Freddie Chavez rode at the BFI one year. And I'd go down there. I think Victor might have been taking care of that deal for a while. But Freddie Chavez just lives down the road, and I ride with Freddie a lot. Freddie's a good guy. Some of the best horses. And he happened to, Bob Scott was right down the road from him. He's real good friends with Bob. Matter of fact, my wife and Mom brought Bob Scott's dog to him from California. Yeah. So Bob Scott's one's greatest.
Freddie that moved a bunch of hay? Was it Freddie that moved a bunch of hay?
American Hay Company, maybe.
Yeah. Boy, they had nice squeezes. Remember those black squeezes they had?
Oh, yeah.
Those are.
Got a boy named Dallas and some daughters,
Yeah.
I give Dallas one of my NFR numbers, as a matter of fact.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, good people. Great people.
Well, Dennis, man, it's been great to have you on here.
For sure.
Thank you guys for listening.
Living legend.
Yeah, living legend. I gotta apologize to the viewers. I promise we'll get a camera because some of the stories we got told off screen the ones on screen were great. But
Well, that was for those, I didn't say it a lot, but thank you guys for having me and for everything.
we really do appreciate it, and we also appreciate Southwest Farms, where you can get your greatest hay anywhere in this country. He'll ship it, buy it, sell it, whatever we got to do. Just look up them Perez boys and they'll
It's
take care of you.
WeSellHay.com is their shout out. WeSellHay.com. That's their plug. So yes, sir.
Yeah. So, all right, boys, we'll let
Thank
you guys
you,
get
guys.
back. You got to get to Vail, huh? Down by Tucson.
No, I'm headed to Peoples Valley.
Oh, well,
beautiful.
you're headed to way
You're
better
going to God's
country.
country.
Yeah,
I'm headed to Wilcox.
are you?
That ain't no fun.
Wrong direction. I'm
Yeah.
going where there's public.
Oh,
Okay.
I'm gonna go up there and rope a couple days and get ready for that roping on Friday.
All right.
Where you at Friday? Wickenburg?
Yeah.
Where are you going, Cesar?
Man, this weekend we got a junior rodeo.
Yeah.
I would rather do that.
Yeah.
I would probably rather do that. I like that.
I enjoy it myself. I get a little that adrenaline rush still. I used to get rodeoing when my boys back in the box rope. You always get a little bit nervous for the family there, but man, we'll be looking forward to
So
that.
Johnny Ringo's getting the call this weekend.
Man, who would have known he's gonna get to? He was such a good barrel horse. He's gonna get to a pole band barrel race, and we're gonna actually enter him up in the steer stopping this year. Him and Johnny are gonna steer stop.
Cool.
How old is he now?
Johnny Ringo is 27 years old.
27.
Yeah.
I got one at the house, the remnant stud I've had. He's 24, but the best horse I ever had died at 27.
Man, it's neat just to. I got him I seen him when they showed up when he was 4 years old, and so I seen his career, and I was was looking at him in the pen. Man, I'd be nice to be able to take that horse and heel on him. About a year later, I ended up owning him, and Yeah, he took me to another
Isn't that
level.
hard to believe that, I mean, to keep him that long and stay that good?
Man, it's like I had a couple times that I could have sold him, but I didn't, and I'm glad I didn't because just the memories I got with him, and all the boys got to ride him. Started to ride on him. My middle boy Gio, he healed his first few steers on that horse, and it's just pretty neat to know
It is
the
awesome.
7-year-old he won a saddle on him last year.
I think after that guy that had that horse buck with him down the arena, I put him on my stud yesterday, just trying to build his confidence back up. I said, you need to wash your horse off. He, what?
All right, man. Well, boys, we'll see you on the next one. Huh?
Yes, sir.
Thank you
fellas.
guys
Yep.
very much.
See ya.
Thank
Yep,
you.
no problem.
I mean,